Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. This is the start of a new series. We completed our way all the way through doing the Targaryen kings. Last week we finished with Viserys III as he styled himself, and I asked my patrons, my $10 plus patrons, what I should do next. I gave them a few different options and they decided by majority that we're going to be looking at houses in Westeros. So that's what we're going to do for the next few weeks, months. We're going to work our way through Westeros and look at the most interesting houses there are, not just the big houses, the Starks and Lannisters, etc. Yes, of course, we will look at them, but also we will try and have a look at the smaller houses that are clearly punching above their weight, or they've got a really intriguing history, or perhaps they're going to come into their own later on in the story of A Song of Ice and Fire. So that's the plan. We're going to take it nice and slow. We're not going to rush our way through this, and we're going to try and dig beneath the headlines to try and understand exactly what's going on with each house. And today we're going to start off with House Bolton, partly because they're quite interesting and partly because I've recently done a video about Roose Bolton himself, his master plan in A Song of Ice and Fire. Do go and check that out if you want. As always, I've got some questions for my patrons. As always, I'm going to pick up as many different questions as I can from the chat as we are going through. But what I'd love to do is just start, as I try to do, by going through and trying to give a little bit of a flavor, a little bit of a history to what's the house itself. What are we actually talking about here? So House Bolton are one of the oldest houses we have. They are a first men house, which means that they are one of those groups of people that came across right back in the Dawn Age from Essos, across that land bridge down into Dawn. They worked their way, fought their way up through Westeros. They fought against the Children of the Forest. There was the Pact. Then they, at some point, they made their way up into the north. And then at some point after that, there was the Long Night. Now, the first mention we have of House Bolton, sort of going back through legends and history, is something Old Nan says. And that is a reference to the Night's King. She's telling this tale to Bran, and she's trying to scare him, basically, and she says, who was the Night's King? Well, some say this, some say that. One of the options she gives is some say he was from House Bolton. Of course, she then ends up saying some say he was from House Stark, maybe even a Brandon Stark. So she's trying to tease him, but the fact that House Bolton are included in that tells us quite how old a house they are, and that they've already even then got a potentially quite sinister reputation. Then we have the next reference to them is the fact that they become known as the Red Kings in the north. And they have a rivalry with House Stark, who are Kings of Winter. Now, this starts, we're told, after that first long night. We're not told any of the details, but by way of context here, we often think of House Stark as ruling over all of the north, all the way through the early years of Westeros, right up to the present day. That's not how it was. It took the Starks thousands of years to become the undisputed rulers of the north. And the Boltons they had their own kingdom, were one of many, tens, hundreds perhaps, of smaller kingdoms. Theirs, however, was quite a large one. I'm going to see whether I can get a little bit of technology to work here. So here we have a map. This is from quartermeister.info website. I don't know who produces it, but whoever they are, I take my hat off to them. Please do go and check out their website and support them. This is a really interesting interactive map of Westeros. I've focused in on the north. So just to get your bearings, right at the very top, sort of cut off there, is the wall. Just below this, we get the neck. Winterfell is sort of in the middle there. If you see that large bit of woodland, right at sort of the bottom middle of that is Winterfell. The road that passes alongside that goes all the way up to the wall. That is the King's Road. So if you take Winterfell and then you go right from there, if you go east from there, you go across a bit of land, across a river, through some hilly land, you will come to another castle. And that is the Dreadfort, home of the Boltons. Now, their original lands, we're told, if you see it sort of bounded there by, there's a river off to their right, there's a river off to their left, there's some hilly land in the middle, there's some forest land to the south. That's where House Hornwood are, incidentally. They used to rule that bit of the north. So, it's a considerable bit of land, but it's not like they were one of the, it's not like they ruled over all of the north at one point. They were close enough to the Starks that they had a rivalry. And this is probably at least one of the practical reasons why we did have this rivalry between House Stark and House Bolton, is that they were both powerful kingdoms in the north, both of whom probably felt that they should be in charge of more land than they were, and they were relatively close to each other. It's not like the Boltons were all the way up near the wall or all the way down near the neck. They were relatively close to each other. So during the period of time that follows, and we don't know exactly how long this period of time is, 1,000, 2,000 years or so maybe, the two houses clash. And on at least a couple of times, we're told that the Boltons had the upper hand enough that they actually came in and set fire to Winterfell. And during this time, we also start getting these reports of the flayings. Now, this is clearly horrible and clearly very sinister, but it's clearly something the Boltons did do. Their sigil, their coat of arms, is a flayed man on a pink background with droplets of blood. And so this is what, wherever they went, they walked with this there just as a warning. This is what they do to the people that they conquer. This is what they do to their enemies. So they are deliberately trying to put across an image which is supposed to intimidate. It's supposed to scare people. And more than one Stark king, we're told, ended up being flayed by them. However, around the start of the Andal invasion of Westeros, the Boltons finally bend to the knee. We're not told of the exact details of how this might have happened. In fact, we're not really told of any details of how it happened, but the Starks won. Now, the Andal invasion was not really an invasion in the way that we might think. It didn't just happen in one go. This happened drip, drip, drip over hundreds of years. And they slowly came in to the south of Westeros below the neck. And there was at least one attempt to do an incursion into the north as well. At which point we are told that the Starks and the Boltons joined forces and defeated the Andals down just south of the Dreadfort. So from this moment on, the Boltons were vassals to the Starks. And over the years that followed, again, we don't know the precise details of how many years. George R. R. Martin is deliberately vague. It has to be said about times, particularly when you're going back into like the Age of Heroes, the exact how many hundreds of years or thousands of years it is, he wants it to be kept quite vague. So we don't know the exact timings. But the Boltons, during this time, at least twice, they revolted against the Starks. They tried to, or they did turn against their overlords. On one of these occasions, they joined forces with the Grey Starks. The Grey Starks were a cadet branch of the Starks, and this was what led to their elimination. The Boltons somehow survived that. The Grey Starks were destroyed, and as a knock-on effect, that meant that what became White Harbour was free, and the Starks could then be inviting House Manderley, who were down south of the Neck, up to come and take possession of that land and guard the White Knife River. So that revolution had some impacts, much longer term impacts as well. But the Boltons, all through this period, they give the impression of, yes, they have accepted the fact they've been beaten by the Starks, but at the same time, if the opportunity came along to try and turn against them, they would grab it. All of this is information we're given largely in the kind of the build-up to the Red Wedding, just sort of dropped here and there. And it's intended to make us feel as if the Boltons perhaps can't be trusted. So, coming up to slightly closer to the present day, we have the Targaryen invasion, and the Boltons, we don't really hear much about their interactions with any of the other main families. We do hear, if you go in Fire and Blood, there's a couple of offhand mentions of them. There was in what became known as the Cow Market, I think it was, when Aegon III, still a child, had all of these eligible women of the realm paraded before him. Who could he possibly wish to marry? One of those people was a Bolton, we're told. She wasn't selected. Then the next time we really hear about House Bolton is when we're almost up to our story. We have Bruce Bolton, by this point, is the leader of House Bolton, Lord there. And he joins up when we get Robert's Rebellion. As he ought, when Ned Stark calls the banners, he joins Ned Stark as part of the larger Stark army. He fights in the Battle of the Trident. This is, it has to be said, one of only a couple of battles that the Starks really had a part in, because it took a long time for Ned to rally all of his troops from the north. First of all, he had to get up to the north, then he had to call the banners, and then he had to march all the way down south. So by the time he got down south, then a lot of battles had already happened. So the Boltons arrived with the army. We're told that they played a part in the Battle of the Trident, and then we're told one detail of what happened afterwards, which is that after Rhaegar's army was defeated, Rhaegar was killed. There were 3 members of the King's Guard there. 2 of them were killed, and then 1 survived. And the one who survived but was injured was Sir Barristan Selmy. And this was already an issue. What do you do with Barristan Selmy? And Robert Baratheon, by this point, had declared that he wasn't just rebelling against this bad king, he wanted to be king himself. So he's now making decisions about, on the basis of, what does he want for when he's king. And what do you do with Barristan Selmy? Barristan Selmy was a legend at the time. He was probably the most famous fighter in all of Westeros. Probably, although Arthur Dayne may well have been a better fighter at that point, Barristan Selmy had a greater legend associated with him. And we're told that Roose Bolton was the person who said, you should kill him. You should kill Barristan Selmy. He was on the wrong side. Robert Baratheon decided to spare Barristan Selmy, and that is why Barristan Selmy, who had been serving in the King's Guard for the Mad King, Aerys II, he then transferred over with Jaime Lannister to be part of the King's Guard for Robert Baratheon. It caused a few issues, although, yes, perhaps people might have disliked Robert for what he did if he had decided to kill Barris and Selmy, it did mean that it set this precedent that actually quite a few of the parts of Aerys II's court stayed as they were. Varys, Master of Whisperers, also stayed in place. 2 members of the Kingsguard, a lot of members of the court stayed where they were. So the feel of the court was, yes, it had it was very Lannister focused. The Baratheons were there, obviously, but it still had remnants of Aerys II's court. It wasn't a complete change. Anyway, then we come up to the story that we have in A Song of Ice and Fire. I'm not going to rehash over everything that happens there, but we first see Roose emerge when Robb calls the banners, and he immediately comes in and is one of, meant to be fair, it's not just him, it's most of the Northern Lords challenge Robb's authority when they arrive at Winterfell. He is just 15. His father is still alive. At this point, Ned is still alive. And Robb has called the banners and said, we're going to have an army go south. And Roose Bolton is there saying, well, I should lead the army because I've got battle experience. You're just 15. This is just sensible. Robb, to start with, basically says, no, I'm leading the army. But when he splits the army in two with his cunning plan to be going down on either side of the river, the main infantry force he gave over to Roose Bolton. Now, as we know, over time, Robb got victory after victory, but then everything fell apart, and Roose eventually decided to switch sides. He had, through all this time, not been in contact with Robb. He just had, the occasional messages between them, and Edmure Tully, in fact, was giving him orders as much as anything else. So it wasn't as if there was this close bond that had formed there. Roose comes to an agreement with Tywin Lannister and also with Walder Frey. Now, it's very noticeable. This is something I did say in that video I did, but it's very noticeable that we often think of the Red Wedding as being a Frey thing. This was Walder Frey, and it was. But the real power here is Roose Bolton. There's this moment that you see, and Catelyn Stark, who always comes across as clever. George R. R. Martin talks about her, writes her as being clever. She notices stuff. And one of the things that she notices is that when we have this wedding feast at the Red Wedding, before everything goes terrible, lots of people give speeches. And then Roose Bolton stands up and gives a very short speech, which she notices quite how pointed it is. He does the congratulations to the bride and groom kind of thing. Then he mentions that Big and Little Walder Frey, who had been up in Winterfell, were now under his protection at the Dreadfort. He had Big and Little Walder, and at which point he kind of looks at Walder Frey, and Walder Frey kind of clocks it and goes, okay, so this is a warning. Do what you're supposed to do because I have your relatives. So the real power here is Roose Bolton, which is shown, I think, by the fact that Walder Frey, what does he get from it? Yes, he survives, he switches sides, he gains a bit more influence. What does Roose Bolton get? He gets to be Warden of the North. He gets to be the House Paramount in the North. He gets the big victory because Tywin Lannister recognizes that he is indeed the real power and the driving force behind what's going on. Roose heads up north. His bastard son, Ramsay, who we will talk about a little bit in a moment. He has, by this point, he's got Theon in his control. He uses Theon to be tricking the Ironborn, who by this point are in Moat Cailin, which is the route back into the north. And that allows Roose Bolton to head up to the north. His aim, it's autumn now in Westerosi speak. Winter is drawing in. His aim then is to marry Ramsay. This is Roos's aim, to marry Ramsay to fake Arya. This is Jane Poole, who has been provided, and everyone's pretending that this is actually Arya. And with Robb dead, with Bran and Rickon believed dead, with Sansa married to Tyrion, she is now the heir to Winterfell, theoretically, in everybody's minds. And so he marries his son. He legitimizes Ramsay and marries him off to fake Arya. And they take Winterfell, at which point winter really sets in. And he declares himself Warden of the North, and the houses of the North are summoned to come and pay fealty to him. Some do willingly, quite a lot do begrudgingly. And that's the point that the story largely gets to. So that's the history of House Bolton. And the impression of that we have of the house itself is very much one of a sinister house, a house that is not just sinister, but is wanting to give the impression of being sinister. And the flayed man thing is horrible, but this is a deliberate image that they're putting forward. They at some point, after the Starks had beaten them, at some point they did say to them, to the Boltons, "You need to stop that now. That's it. You're not allowed to do that anymore." In a fit of morality from the Starks, and the Boltons said, "Oh, okay, then fine." But everybody thinks that they just carried on doing it just in secret. The Dreadfort has got many layers below ground, and there are many rooms down there that everyone just thinks they still do this. So that is sort of a quick rundown of House Bolton. Let's have a quick look in the chat. Cloaked One, hey there, Cloaked One, great to see you. G'day, Robert, g'day to you too, saying it's been a while and I'm glad to be back. Hope you and Dan the dog are doing well. We are, thank you very much. It's fantastic to see you. Let's go to a question from Mage Pie, saying, "Hello, Robert. House Bolton traditions sound so savage by Westerosi standards that I wonder where they came from. Could it be some darker aspect of the First Men culture, or maybe a corruption of it? The influence of the Night's King? Question mark. Okay, so where does this come from? Well, I think the first part of what you say is undoubtedly part of the equation. The First Men were a lot more brutal and brutish than the modern sort of southern Westerosi culture that we often see. And this gets described in various ways, particularly about the Starks, when they were hard men back in, the First Men. We get Bran having this vision through the Weirwood tree where he sees some of what appeared to be early Starks doing a sacrifice. This was a really kind of brutish existence early on. And in the north, there are still some parts that remain a bit like that. You don't have to go too far off of the coast, further up from where the Boltons are. You get to places like Skagos, where they're allegedly there are cannibals. Obviously, north of the Wall, who are First Men as well. Let's not forget the Wildlings, the Free Folks are First Men as well. There's a lot of practices going on there that perhaps are a bit darker than we might expect south of the Wall. And the Boltons having been kings for a long time and therefore able to do whatever they wanted to, and then still retaining this independent streak for a very long period of time, they almost certainly just kept up with the traditions that they wanted to. And no Stark, really, other than when they forced them to stop, at least in practice, in public, doing the flaying, no Stark ever really managed to tame them. Nor, it has to be said, have the Starks had this desire to particularly tame all of the North. There's the hill clans, they're called houses, but if you go north of Winterfell through the Wolf's Wood and then to the mountains there before you get up to the wall, there's a whole load of these hill clans mountains that perhaps at some point they could have tried to tame, tried to civilize, if you like, but they never did. Bear Island has very different practices to a lot of what's going on in the rest of the North. So the Starks never really tried to make sure that everybody stayed exactly in line. And so we shouldn't be surprised that there are some parts of the North that still have some quite nasty habits left over from the time of the First Men. So that's definitely part of the equation. Is there a link there to the Night's King? I think I've got another question sort of related to this a little bit later, but there are hints here, but I would say nothing more. First of all, as I've already said, Old Man did kind of suggest this possibility that maybe the Night's King was a Bolton. Roose Bolton we're told, has blue eyes. His Ramsay Bolton has eyes of chipped grey ice, we're told, with bits of blue. So there's that kind of blue eye link that goes on there. The suggestion, I will get onto a fan theory much later on, which is a whole load of fun, which suggests in part that maybe they could be descended from the Night's King, had a child with what appears to be a female other. From the way that the story is told, we know what happens to the Night's King, we know what happens to the Night's Queen. What happened to that child? Is that perhaps where House Bolton came from? We only really hear about them after the Long Night. So there's lots of possibilities, lots of rumours, lots of maybes, but nothing which is clear-cut, it has to be said. Could there be a link? Yes. Do we know that there's a link? No. Alhad saying, greetings, Robert. Greetings to you too. Great new thing for live streams. Looking forward to it. Me too, actually. This is all of the things I suggested for my patrons. I quite like the idea of, but this it's been a while since I've gone through some of the houses in depth, and some of them I never have done in a live stream. So I'm very much looking forward to this. Can you please describe the Dreadfort? I'm very happy. So the Dreadfort is the House Bolton castle home. Now, we do have a couple of chapters there. Reek Theon is captured there. It's by the river. It's a big castle. It's strong. Its walls are thick. It would be quite hard to capture. We're told it's very defendable. Quite hard to capture, even with only a few people there. In fact, we do get a reference to this when Stannis is trying to figure out how do I reclaim, how do I claim the North? Where do I go with my army? And the news comes that the Dreadfort now has only got 50 soldiers there. And he's great. We'll go to the Dreadfort. And Jon says, well, no, I know the Dreadfort. 50 soldiers, you could still defend it. So this is quite a strong castle. It's the way it's built. It's got triangle-shaped merlons, which merlons being, if you think of the top of a castle when it sort of goes up and down like that. Instead of sort of going up and down like that, they're triangle shaped, and it looks like they're teeth on the top of this castle. When you get inside, then it feels old. You get to their great hall, which has got this great high ceiling. It's got a wooden ceiling, but it's all blackened with soot from the centuries that have gone by. If you look along the walls and the sconces, they're holding the torches, is these human skeletal hands holding torches. That's the kind of feel. It's dark. It's supposed to be giving in this kind of this fear to people who do not know it. It's got lots of storage, we're told. At one point, the Starks besieged this, and the Boltons were very happy there for 2 years, we're told. They had storage and food there for 2 years. It also has quite a lot going on underneath it, which is true for quite a few of the northern houses, it has to be said. It has these rumoured rooms where these flayings happen. There's rumours that they have kept the skins of some of the Stark kings, the kings of winter and others there. And we also are told that they have the equivalent of like the Winterfell crypts. All of the Boltons are buried underneath the Dreadfort. So that's the kind of the feel. It's supposed to be dark and imposing. It's a strong castle. It's not the kind of place that you would willingly go to. Maura Lee, thank you so much. Very generous. Thank you, Maura. You know how much I appreciate your support. Saying just a show of love and appreciation for the fabulous content, merch, and stories. Sending a special request for photos of Dan park walk photos. Well, yeah, perhaps I can do that. I will try to have a look for whether I can do some of them. It's autumn is a lovely time for dog walks, if a little bit wet underfoot. Aegon Dragonborn in the chat saying, in popular folklore, skinning is a commonly used practice of werewolf hunters. In A Song of Ice and Fire, skinning is House Bolton's most infamous practice, and they are the nemesis of the House of the Wolf. Yeah, there's definitely this element that is there, that is the connection across to the Starks. It's noticeable also he being Roose Bolton, when he's in Harrenhal, he decides to go wolf hunting. It's clearly symbolic. This is one of my favourite chapters. I've talked about this before. One of my favourite chapters in all of A Song of Ice and Fire. It's the chapter when Roose Bolton officially decides to change sides, and one of the bits of symbolism we have is he decides to go hunting for wolves. Yes, that's, and then obviously they will be pelted. Lucian says Roose Bolton is the Van Helsing of Westeros, and we all hate him for it. Yeah, I see where you're going with there. Andrew Kay saying pre-Stark Northern Conquest and unification out of the petty kings up there. Did the Red Kings control the largest area besides the Starks? We don't know is the short answer. It certainly seems to be a large area that they controlled. Whether it was the largest area, it's not at all clear. The issue we have, because we have so little, we have such paucity of information, but the implication is that House Stark was founded at some point around when the wall was built, because their founding father was Bran the Builder, and Bran was associated with the building of the wall, and so presumably what follows on from that is the establishment of House Stark, and then them trying to expand their territories and coming up against the Boltons relatively quickly. Now, did House Bolton exist before that? We do not know. Was there a proto House Stark before that? Again, we do not know. But Winterfell appears to have been founded at around that same time. So, yeah, it seems to have been that they are two houses which were, after the long night, they find that they are two powerful houses next to each other. Let's go to a question from Alana Prestane of Bravos. Hello, Robert. I hope you're well. I am. Thank you. My immediate thought was that House Bolton's level of inflicting pain is similar to House Greyjoy, more than your average houses. But Roose and Ramsay, if they could have worked together, could have matched Euron in his level of sick behavior and cunning. Well, it's an interesting comparison. I think, for my money, there's a difference here between the house and the individuals. So I think Euron, just his own, Euron was his ambitions for what he wished to do way in excess of whatever Ramsay Bolton or Roose Bolton have been wanting to do. One of the big things when I did my video, Roose Bolton's Master Plan, that was one of the collaborations I've done with History of Westeros. One of the big things that came out from there is the fact that Roose Bolton, yes, he might be ambitious, but he's an opportunist as much as anything else. He's waiting to see what's going to happen, and then he's going to go where he thinks he can get the best outcome for himself and his house. Whereas Euron just has this massive vision and is just going for it. He's not waiting for random opportunities. He is pushing the action. He's not being reactive. He's being proactive. And then when you get the houses, though, I think we've got slightly different again in that the Boltons have always had this kind of slightly sinister, slightly rebellious approach, which means that the approach that Roose Bolton has taken is actually completely fitting what we've learned of the Boltons all this way through. Just itching, waiting for a chance to rebel against the Starks. Actually, really, when you get close to them, they make your skin crawl. They're sinister, calculating, and just really nasty. That's the kind of feel we have from House Bolton, which flows all the way through to Roose Bolton. Euron, his approach is different to most of the Greyjoys. The Greyjoys very much sign up to the old way. This is how the we do not sow comes in. We will look at House Greyjoy, I'm sure, at some point in this series, but we do not sow sounds like one of the most benign kind of house words you could imagine. It's just like, so they don't farm. Okay, so what does that? This means that they don't farm because they're going to take other people's stuff. That's how they survive. They don't set up home and then just be happy growing the stuff that they want to have. Everything they get, they're going to pay the iron price. They're going to go and kill people and get other people's stuff. But by and large, they're not about conquering. There have been a couple of Ironborn and Greyjoys who have been sort of there up for conquest, but they don't want to really stray too far from the sea. That's basically what it is. They are creatures of the sea and the islands. Euron and his vision is completely different to his ancestors in that he wants to rule Westeros is even underplaying it. He wishes to be the god of Westeros. His vision is so big, he basically wants to destroy everything that there is in Westeros until there's just ashes and cinders. And then he wants to be ruling over whatever grows up after that. He wants to kill all of the other gods, get rid of the other religions, so it's just him. That's very different to both what's going on with the Boltons and what has happened previously with the Greyjoys. And this is why he takes up this kind of role as being, and it's only starting to play out now in the books, but I think that we will see this in the last two books as being the sort of the secondary baddie, the kind of the Saruman of this story. He's when we've dealt with this whole ice and fire threats the others, what are you going to do about these massive dragons burning everybody? Once we've dealt with all of that and everyone just takes a breath, and then they're going to look around and go, oh, and then there's this guy. That's what we're looking at with Euron. So yes, I absolutely agree. They're both offering these kind of twin threats, but I think that the feel of both of them is slightly different. Cloaked One asking if it was a deliberate decision that we're covering one of the more creepy houses for the stream just before Halloween. Not a deliberate decision, but then I did just think about, as I was reading through, I actually just today I thought, actually, yes, it's quite good timing. Yes-ish, I suppose. Cloaked One picking up from Mark Shisa. Thank you. I love it when people do this, pick up questions for others. Why didn't the Starks forbid the Boltons from doing their gruesome stuff? Well, they did at some point. So by their gruesome stuff, we're talking the flayings here. They did ban them from doing that. Why didn't they ban them from doing other things? A lot of this is how the Starks governed. And how the kind of it's in a sort of a feudal-ish system. The Starks, kings of the north, and underneath them there were a few of these major houses, and these major houses had underneath them smaller houses, and those smaller houses underneath them had even smaller houses. And so the balance that the Starks would have for the Boltons, but also for the other big houses, the Carstarks, the Umbers, and so on, was you give them the freedom to be running their area, but you have to make sure that they are still staying in their place. Now, what that meant, particularly when you get the north, where it takes a long time to be traveling anywhere, to be actually imposing anything, that you probably do turn a blind eye to a few things. So the distance we shouldn't underestimate in this, because getting anywhere in the north could take weeks or months. The Starks, the Lord of the Starks, the King of Winter, will have to visit all the different parts of the north. When you get to winter, you cannot travel. So a quarter of the time you can't get to anywhere anyway. So whatever people get up to, they just get up to. And then there's always going to be something calling you somewhere else. So when the equivalent of what happened with Jorah Mormont, and Ned Stark decided he has to go over there, he has to just deliver some justice for this person who started basically setting up a slave trade. Let's not beat around the bush. That's what Jorah Mormont did. And Ned Stark said, I'm not having any of that. He travelled all the way over to Bear Island, by which time Jorah had gone. Getting over to Bear Island will have taken weeks. It will have taken weeks to come back again. And then by which point there will have probably been an issue going on somewhere else with the Carstarks, with House Dustin. It would have taken weeks to go there and weeks to get back. Which is a kind of a long-winded way of saying that most of the time, House Bolton will have been left alone to do what it does, to be managing its lands and its people and its business. And if the bosses, the Starks, were going to be coming, they would get a raven that says, the Starks are on their way, you've got 2 weeks. And they could just hide evidence of anything they want to, and then carry on. So why did they let them get away with it? It's half the Starks turning a blind eye, because that's just the way the system works. And in order for the system to work, then the houses have to be allowed a certain degree of autonomy, and partly because it just in the north, it was very hard to micromanage these kinds of things. Okay, let's go to some more questions from the chat. Reflective rambling. Got to revive Super Chat War with a cloaked one. This is from Urias Tosh. Thank you very much for picking this one up. When was the last recorded Stark-Bolton marriage? Wow. Now that's tested me. I struggle to think of one. I'll be honest, this is the kind of thing. There's always one thing that I get a mind blank on. This is the kind of thing that the chat, I'm sure, will be able to help with. Feel free to have a little Google on this one. When there was last a Stark-Bolton marriage? It may well be not for a very long time. Atri saying, I'm rarely able to catch you live, but today is special since I'm able to do so now. No question, but keep up the great work. Have a blessed rest of your day. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I hope you have a blessed rest of your day as well. Astronaut E saying, I imagine a Stark castle inspector checking to ensure there was no flaying taking place. Yeah, I mean, how do you do this? You send somebody over saying, just making sure you're not being naughty. Okay, and another question from Reflective Rambling, picking up from Mike Hanna. Are Winterfell's defenses restored by the Boltons at this point, or are they still working on that? Or are they even planning to? So to sort of catch people up with the story, the Winterfell, when Theon took it, and then it was taken from Theon basically by the Boltons, by Ramsay Bolton, and he then burnt it down. This was the point at which Bran and Rickon and co escaped Winterfell. They'd been hiding away in the crypts, and they escaped at this point. And Ramsay, having burned Winterfell, then took prisoners and headed back down to the Dreadfort and abandoned it. Now, burning Winterfell, I mean, Winterfell is a stone castle. This is not Dragonfire. So the burning Winterfell, yes, it did huge amounts of damage to all of the wooden structures. Some of the stone ones became unstable, but it didn't destroy the fabric of Winterfell. So when they all came back up there, when Roose Bolton decided he wanted to marry Ramsay to fake Arya, Jane Poole. The original idea was to do this in Barrowtown, but then he decided, winter's coming, let's do this in Winterfell. We should get to Winterfell. We should stake our claim there, and this will be more official if we have this done in Winterfell, because we're pretending this is a Stark wedding. So they headed up there and they got settled in. Now, is it all repaired? It's not back to where it was. That much is clear. However, winter has set in. The basic structure is there. They are all. There's a lot of people in Winterfell at the moment, and when you're inside, broadly speaking, we don't read many reports of, it's terrible, this is all collapsed and we haven't got enough room. It is bad, but it's not terrible. But the biggest issue is that winter has set in. So the biggest barrier is not the fact of all of the defenses. You genuinely can't see a lot of Winterfell anymore because, and this is, there's a whole rabbit hole here. If you want to go down this, there's a whole rabbit hole here. Why Winterfell? Winterfell seems to be almost the nexus of winter, in quite how much snow and cold is going on there. 6 of the 7 gates to Winterfell have frozen shut. You can't even open them. And so only one is still usable. The walls to Winterfell, I forget exactly how high, but they are very high walls. And Theon and Jane Poole managed to escape by jumping off of one of these massive, this is several stories high, jumping off the top of the wall because the snowdrifts below were so deep that it would break their fall. The snowdrifts are, I think it was something like 30 or 40 feet high. So we're talking, a good 10 meters or so, if not more, of snow. And that is how much there is. When you get this Barbary Dustin, just another random example, Barbary Dustin is with Theon, and she's got this agenda that's going on. She's trying to stop Ned Stark's bones getting to Winterfell because she's got a personal grudge for a variety of reasons. Actually, I've got a video on this one coming out at some point in the next couple of weeks. Keep an eye out for that. Where are Ned Stark's bones? If you're wondering, then keep an eye out for that video. But Barbary Dustin, she goes up to Winterfell, and she wants to make sure that Ned Stark's bones aren't already there. And who the people at Winterfell are not the old people at Winterfell. The person that does know Winterfell, who is there, is Theon, who is Reek at this point. And so she says to him, "Where's the Winterfell crypts?" Not the only person to be asking Theon where the Winterfell crypts are. We get the Washerwomen, which is Abel the Bards. So this is Mance Raider and the Wildlings. They're constantly asking, where are the crypts? Where's the entrance? And the reason why nobody can find them is because there's a snowdrift that is so big that it's covered over the entrance to the crypts, and nobody knows where that is. And even when they clear away all of the snow, the door has frozen into place. So that's how much winter has arrived at Winterfell. This seems completely out of scale with what's happening in different parts of the north, where winter has also arrived, but perhaps not quite that strongly. So a very long way around, but the answer to this question, which was about are the defenses restored at this point, or are they still working on that or planning to? They started to do it, but winter's just got in the way. And now winter is the defense. That's where they're at. You can't get at the walls. You can't get to one of the gates to even see whether that gate is has been burned down or something, because the snowdrifts are so high. That's how big and serious winter is. But yeah, really interesting question. And another question from Charis Ballerina saying there is no other known Stark Bolton marriage. There we go. I knew that the chat would be able to find this one out for me. That'll be why I couldn't remember one. Thank you very much for that. Nicole Knock saying, "Good day, Robert. Good day to you too. What do you think will become of the Dreadfort post the Winds of Winter? Will Ramsay and Roose die at the Battle for Winterfell?" Well, I've got some questions from my patrons about the Battle for Winterfell and Roose and Ramsay's fate, so I will tackle that one in just one moment. But here, what will happen to the Dreadfort? My general take is that the Dreadfort is now, I wouldn't say it's no longer important, but the action has shifted. Roose and Ramsay are now based in Winterfell. The winter is such that unless and until we get Melisandre doing some weather magic, which I suspect she will, moving between places is really, really hard. And so actually getting across to the Dreadfort is not going to be that easy. So I suspect that Roose and Ramsay, their fate will be in and around Winterfell rather than connected to the Dreadfort. So the question is, what then happens to the Dreadfort? I think probably it might be that somebody tries to make use of this and tries to take it over, but I don't think it's going to be central to the story, because by the time Roos and Ramsay are no longer a central part of this story, spoiler for what I'm about to say a little bit later, I think probably they both will die. Once that happens, we're facing the threat from the others. So all of the other issues coming up are less important. And if you look at the kind of the geography, actually, shall I see whether I can get the technology back up again? Here we go. So to remind you here, this is a map of the north. The wall is just off the top of this map. If the others do breach the wall and head down south, then the first main place that they come to is the last hearth, which you might just be able to see a little red dot just to the top of the big bit of green, sort of the top right of it there. But then where are they going to go? If they sort of head south from there, what their tactics seem to have been, certainly if you take the TV show, but it seems to be roughly the same in the books, they're not in a rush. They're getting rid of all humans everywhere that they go and then continually pushing south. So perhaps what they would do is that they would sweep around to the Cull, which is in that bit of forest off to the east, and then through the Dreadfort, and then head over to Winterfell. That makes a kind of a very broad sense, but so maybe we will see that. But the choice of defensive place to go, they could theoretically be saying, well, maybe we should go to the Dreadfort because that's quite good defensively. But I think Winterfell was designed for this. It would be wrong for them to be going to the Dreadfort. Okay, is that me caught up in the chat? I think so. Cloaked One saying loving the map use for the. I'm enjoying the map use actually as well. I'll probably keep doing that actually for some of these. I think having the map there just gives a little bit of an understanding so that we can see where each of these houses are. Let's go to a question from Diego Godoy saying, Hola, Robert. Do you think that, like in the show, Ramsay will kill Roos in the books? And Al had also asked, who do you think will die first, Roos or Ramsay? So this is an interesting one. Roos Bolton, as a character, he's phlegmatic, I suppose, is one way of putting it. Quite relaxed, quite accepting of his own mortality. He seems absolutely fine. I mean, I wish I had the quote. Maybe I do have the quote somewhere. No, I don't think I do. That's far too organised for me. I've already got a map up. Having quotes is yet another thing. But Ramsay, when he's talking to Theon, Roos, when he's talking to Theon about Ramsay, he's basically saying, and just as an aside, before I get to that, one of the wonderful things about the Theon chapters later on is that because Ramsay has done such a good job, if good is the right way of putting it, an effective job of brainwashing Theon, people confide in him because they think he's not going to say anything to anyone because he's so scared of Ramsay. So Roos does seemingly confide in him. And one of the things that Roos says about Ramsay is that basically he's expecting that Ramsay will kill any more children that he has. And he's sort of okay with that, he says, because he's not going to live to see them grow up to be men. So why not let Ramsay kill them? He's now legitimized Ramsay. Ramsay can succeed him. So Roose is quite relaxed and open to this possibility. He certainly knows what Ramsay's like. He certainly thinks that Ramsay's a killer. And I don't think he thinks that Ramsay particularly loves him. So I don't think that Roose would be surprised if Ramsay does kill him. So that's what happened on the show. Might it happen in the books? Yes. I don't think we've had the particular setup for that yet, or the foreshadowing for it. But it would feel a bit in character. You'd have to have a reason for Ramsay to do it, though. And at the moment, actually, as far as Ramsay's concerned, it's probably quite useful having Roose around. So there's no particular reason why he would want to get rid of him. So that may change. We're in a bit of the story where I think that the Boltons need to show some cohesion in order to defend it. They've got an army sort of camped just a few days outside their walls. This is Stannis' army. It would not be the right time for them to be turning on each other. So I don't think it's imminent. It may happen, but we haven't yet had the build up to it. Maura saying House Bolton and House Stark have been bitter rivals for a long time. We saw what happened to Ramsay on the TV show. Do I see a similar fate for him in the books? And if so, would it be the end of House Bolton? And sort of connected with this, George R.R. Tolkien is saying, salutations. I'm curious about what you think will happen to the Boltons in the Winds of Winter. The show gave us a really cool Battle of the Bastards feel, but I feel we won't be getting that in the books because of Stannis' part to play. Do you think it will still end up going that way? Okay, so what's going to happen? What's going to happen to House Bolton in the Winds of Winter? Well, let's set this up so we know we're in the same place, and then we'll try and logically work our way through what's going to happen. Now, Stannis has decided he's going to get rid of House Bolton. Why? Because Stannis, at this point, he's now up at the wall. He's got the threat from the others coming. He's actually very sensibly realized that he has to save the Seven Kingdoms before he can become the king of the Seven Kingdoms. And the first step in doing that is unifying the North, obviously under his rule. And so having tried and failed to convince Jon that he should join him and become the Lord of Winterfell, he sets out to take Winterfell down himself. Now, he's gone to Deepwood Motte and then across through the Wolfswood and is now camped at a crofter's village just a few days outside Winterfell. The Boltons are aware of this. We've already mentioned winter has fallen really badly. And whereas this is bad for people in Winterfell, Winterfell has got two crucial advantages. First of all, it's got buildings. Sounds stupid, but you can hide out from the cold and the snow, and you can keep yourself pretty warm. And the second bit of advantage is it is on hot springs, boiling hot springs. And the water, years ago, they figured out a system to get the water coursing through the walls. So they've got central heating in Winterfell Castle, which means that they can actually stay warm and dry and safe, and the winter will pass them by. They can even, there's although obviously Ramsay has done his damage, but historically they've had these glass gardens, they've had greenhouses, which the warm water was sort of fed through, and that they could grow crops all through even into the winter. They could create a small ecosphere that they could grow crops through, even when it's snowing outside. So Winterfell is a great place to be in the winter. Out in a crofter's village, as the snows are coming down heavily, is not a good place to be. And that's where Stannis is at the moment. He's camped between these two lakes, and a battle is going to come. Because although Winterfell's a good place to be in, Winterfell is not a happy place to be in at the moment. Because, yes, there are some people who are relatively loyal to the Boltons. There are quite a few families who are actually loyal to the Starks, but the Boltons have got a hold over them somehow. Maybe that the Lannisters have got a hold of one of the Manderleys, for example, and lots of these families, they've got prisoners being kept by the Boltons or the Lannisters or the Freys or someone like that. So these houses are not happy to be there, but they've all been summoned basically to Winterfell, and they have to be there. And then there's this series of murders which is going on, which is slightly unexplained at the moment, and particularly two houses, the Freys and the Manderleys, are at each other's throats. And this is not just the lords are sort of glaring at each other. They're coming to blows. The soldiers for these two houses are coming to blows with each other. And Roose Bolton, one of the things when I was doing the Roose Bolton's master plan, which I kind of noticed before, but I hadn't realized quite how many times he did this. Roose Bolton's favorite tactic that he does again and again and again is when there's a battle coming, he sends someone else's troops there. Now, when I say he does this again and again and again, the first battle he has against Tywin, he makes sure that the troops that are sort of in the fiercest bit of the battle are not his troops, but these are Stark loyalists. Then he sends some Stark loyalists off randomly to attack Duskendale when he's situated at Harrenhal. Not his troops, other troops. Then on his way back up towards the Red Wedding, he crosses the river, but makes sure that his troops go across first, and then the Stark loyalist troops are coming across last. And lo and behold, there's an ambush. So this is like 3 times already he's done this. Now, here he's based in Winterfell. He knows that Stannis is outside somewhere. Perhaps his plan thus far had been to just let Stannis freeze to death, which is, to be fair, a reasonable plan. But things are not going well in Winterfell, and so he says to the Freys, he says to the Manderleys, okay, you two form a little army, head out there and attack Stannis. So they do. The Freys and the Manderleys get on the horses and head out of Winterfell. This is a win for Roose because, what happens? They beat Stannis. He's defeated Stannis. That threat has gone. They lose to Stannis. Then he's got rid of a couple of quarreling people that made his life in Winterfell a lot harder. This is win-win for him. So what's going to happen? Well, I will do videos on all of this, sort of picking out what's going to be happening in the future there. But I think the first thing to have to say is that there is a plot going on around Winterfell. Some of the Stark loyalists have got people. They've dug holes under the snow to be capturing unwary Boltons and Freys and the like. The Freys and the Manderleys, as we've already said, hate each other, and the Manderleys will happily attack the Freys. So this battle, when it happens with Stannis, is not going to be the Freys and the Manderleys against Stannis. It will almost certainly turn into Stannis and the Manderleys against the Freys. But still, Stannis and his army is going to be left outside in the cold, and Roose Bolton is going to be left inside in the warm. Something has to happen. Now, on the TV show, then Stannis was injured in this, and then Brienne comes up and kills him, sort of gives him a mercy killing. That's not going to happen in the books. Brienne is nowhere near there. Stannis probably still has a bit more of a role to play. But this is the point at which I feel that Melisandre probably is going to be doing her weather magic. Perhaps this is where we get the Shireen sacrifice going on. She says that her magic is far more potent at the wall. She wants to be able to get Jon Snow down to help out, take with him an army of wildlings or whoever down to Winterfell to help out Stannis, alleviate the weather so Stannis doesn't freeze to death down there. Lots of reasons why she wants to perform a weather spell. I think that's going to happen. I think that we will end up with a battle between Stannis' forces and Jon's forces coming together against the Boltons, and a lot of the people within Winterfell will turn against the Boltons. That, I suspect, will probably be the end of Roose in one way, shape, or form. Ramsay, this is where the Rickon thing comes in, because Rickon is gone, but he's gone to Skagos. Everybody's pretty clear that that's where he is. And off camera, Davos has been sent by the Mandalese to go and get him. Now, the timings here are actually, we think that he's just been sent. It's actually been a few months. So we've George R. Martin has given us a few months of no Stannis POVs. So there's a fair chance that he is gone. Maybe he's even found Rickon by this point, and then he comes back. There is foreshadowing for Ramsay to be hunting wolves and men. That's what he says. He's trained his dogs to be hunting wolves and men. I think that they will probably be going after Rickon. It's been a long-standing fan theory that his direwolf is called Shaggy Dog, and his is a Shaggy Dog story. A long, rambling, winding story that ultimately doesn't really lead anywhere. And George R. R. Martin has said he was disappointed when Rickon was not really... initially the showrunners wanted not to include Rickon in the show at all, and then didn't really make much of him when he was in the show. And he said he was disappointed because Rickon had an important part to play. What important part is that? Well, the Mandalese are going to be Team Rickon. And that's the important part, whereas Jon is also going to be there, and perhaps some people will be saying, aha, and Rob legitimized Jon in his will, and then perhaps Littlefinger's going to arrive with Sansa, and it's like, aha, and here's Sansa. She should be the Lady of Winterfell. And suddenly we get, although the Starks probably won't turn on each other, their supporters may. And so this is going to be quite a complicated situation going on. So that's roughly where we're going to get to, and somewhere around the end of that, I suspect we will end up with clear leadership in the north, probably Jon, and the Boltons will have been dealt with. Now, is Ramsay going to die in the same way he did on the show? No, because on the show he was married to Sansa. He wasn't married to Sansa in the books. So we don't get Sansa getting her revenge on him in the books. Might Jane Poole get her revenge on him? Might Theon get his revenge on him? All of these things are possible, but I suspect that Ramsay probably will die at some point in the Winds of Winter. Let's have a quick look through the chat. I think I've got some questions in here. Yeah, let's go to a question from Inglorious Pumpkin Pie. This is Cloaked One, picking up a question for Inglorious Pumpkin Pie, which is a great username. Are there parallels between the Hellholt and the Dreadfort? And are there any other torture-happy noble houses? So the Hellholt, this is House Ulla down in Dawn, basically in the middle of the desert. And there are a lot of parallels, it has to be said, with House Bolton. They also used to rule their part of Dawn in the same way that the Boltons used to rule their part of the north. They kept their traditions up in the same way that the Boltons have, and their lords have never really cracked down on it, partly because they're in the middle of a desert and it's quite a hassle going there, partly because the Hellholt, which obviously echoes the Dreadfort, that the names are similarly sinister sounding, is not the kind of place that you'd want to go to. In fact, the Hellholt, they have their own kind of version of the Red Wedding. There's a story that's in their history of them inviting some people around, and then they had guest right, and then they killed them. So there's also a link there. If you remember, Roose Bolton was really the mastermind of the Red Wedding. So the other link across, the echo across, I suppose, is this idea of torture chambers beneath the Hellholt and beneath the Dreadfort. When we get Queen Rhaenys, really, one of the three original Targaryens, her dragon gets shot down over the Hellholt, and she is presumed killed. But the rumor persisted that actually House Ulla captured her, took her down into their torture chambers, and kept her alive and tortured her because of all the horrendous things that the dragons had been doing to the people of Dawn. They were exacting their revenge. So yes, there are echoes across between the two. Are there other houses that sort of delight in torture? Not to the same extent as those two. I think they are set up as being sort of echoes of each other. So the heat of the desert and the cold of the ice and snow. Terra Incognita saying, obviously Roose will die and Ramsay will have a mysterious personality change. I will get onto that theory a bit later. Reflective Rambling picking up for LD. Are there any examples of heroic Boltons? I know a female Bolton who tells Aegon III that the North is starving when she's a potential bride. Yes, so she did. I've forgotten her name off the top of my head. I'm sure someone in the chat will remember. But basically, she gets rejected as being a bride for Aegon III, but then she does sort of say, but it's winter. It's winter. It has been winter in the North. There's a lot of starving people. Particularly, there's all of these... we've had war. The land has been ravaged by war. Farms have been destroyed. There's not much food to go around. And Aegon III basically says, yeah, okay, so we've got all of these feasts and stuff here. Well, just take the food out and give it to the poor, which is a nice thing to do. Does that make her heroic? I suppose in the land of the 1%ers, then this probably does. She seems to be one of the only people who seems to care about the small folk, and I always have a soft spot for the lords in Westeros who actually seem to have a care for the vast majority of people who's not there just playing the Game of Thrones. As for other heroic Boltons, we're not really told of any. No. Even the ones that we sort of read of as sort of being okay with the Starks, they're still doing pretty sinister stuff on the side. There was a rebellion, or in fact not a rebellion, when the Andals did attack the North, and the Starks and the Boltons fought side by side. You might think, and they they pushed them out. They prevented the Andals from taking over the north, which I suppose just saved their culture. The first men, when you look in the neck in the south, then the weirwood trees were all chopped down, burned down. The old ways, the old faith was gone. So they saved all of that. However, what do we read? Well, that Lord Bolton, he flayed his enemies and he made a tent out of their skin. I mean, it's horrible stuff he's doing, and the feeling is that the Stark King there is like, okay, this is the price I have to pay for stopping the Andals. So no real heroic ones. Let's go to Callie Summers. Is Roos a candidate for the prologue of the Winds of Winter? Interesting. So George R. R. Martin he obviously likes having prologues, and prologues are there to set the scene for the whole book. It's not just like here's an interesting thing. It's a one-off POV from a character who dies, usually in that prologue, but almost definitely at some point in that book. So is Roos a potential candidate for that? I suppose he could be, if it weren't for the fact that George R. R. Martin has actually told us. I don't think he's actually told us explicitly whose POV it's going to be, but Jane Westerling, Robb Stark's wife, is going to be involved, which means that this is going to be taking place down in the Riverlands, not up in the north. So what might that POV chapter be? I mean, my best guess at this moment is Jamie has basically said she's now going to be sent off back to the Westerlands. She's in the Riverlands. She's going to be sent off back to the Westerlands. And there are various groups in the Riverlands who may wish to stop that. There's Lady Stoneheart's Brotherhood Without Banners. There's the Super Pack of Wolves. There's the Blackfish and the garrison from Riverrun, who are just out and about there. There's also a few other random people who used to be in the Brotherhood Without Banners and then decided, actually, I don't quite like the way this is going under Lady Stoneheart, and sort of went out on their own. There's lots of different potential people, but I suspect this will be her being sent off to the west and then her wagon train being intercepted. Martin S. With a show question. When the Wildling army threatens the Night's Watch in earlier seasons, it's portrayed as huge. But when fighting with Jon Snow in the Battle of the Bastards, it appears far weaker. What's the main explanation? Well, in the show, because obviously we've not got to that bit in the books, but I'll try and give an answer that sort of covers what's going on in the books as well. The idea is that the Wildlings, when they came south, they came to the wall. This wasn't an army per se. This was all the Wildlings. And that's it. So this was not just like the fighters. This was the fighters plus the children, plus the old people, plus anyone else who's not going to be fighting. This was everybody. All came together, all heading south. So that is a massive group of people. By the time when they get through the wall, and then Jon's trying to figure out what on earth to do with all of these, then he sends some of them off to garrison other forts along the wall, because the Night's Watch, they had, I think, 17 forts spaced across the wall. By the time we get to the main story, we have only 3 of them. The Shadow Tower off to the west, the East Watch by the sea across at the east, and then roughly in the middle, Castle Black. But all of the other ones have been abandoned, which means there's literally hundreds of miles of wall where nobody's keeping an eye on it, particularly given the fact that a huge chunk of the already incredibly depleted Night's Watch were destroyed when they went on the Great Ranging North. There's not that many members of the Night's Watch left. So John's thought is, let's populate this with as many people as we possibly can. So yes, some he's sending off to there. Some are just hanging around at the wall. The wildlings they're not one group. There are lots of different tribes and families and cultures, so they don't all want to do the same thing. They all agreed to follow Mance Rayder, but as far as they're aware, Mance Rayder is dead. Nobody else has taken his place as the main leader of the wildlings, so they'll do what they want. And only some of them decide that what they want to do is follow John down to Winterfell. So that's the overall picture, which is what's sort of the case in the books as far as we've got in the books. And I suspect, although they didn't really talk through this in much detail on the show, I suspect that's the logic of what it was. Only a small fraction of all of the wildlings went to Winterfell. Okay, let's go to questions from where have we got? Maura Lee. So, in A Dance with Dragons, House Bolton's rule is contested by Stannis and several of the Northern Lords. How do you think this will play out, especially with the eventual return of Rickon Stark and his sister Sansa? Well, I've started answering this one, so I'll sort of finish this off. We are going to get what will appear to be a Stark succession crisis, because we have no Stark in Winterfell, but a desire to re-establish the Starks in Winterfell. You will have what Bran, who should have been the heir. Everyone thinks he's dead, but he isn't dead. He may appear at some point. He would have people backing him if he wished to be the Stark Lord, because he was the heir. He was Robb's heir, and then he was thought dead, and Robb then wrote a will on the basis of him being dead. Oh, but he's not, therefore he is theoretically the heir. We get Rickon, who may well appear before Bran appears, who the Manderleys have decided that they are championing. Here is a Stark. Here is the person we wish to have as the heir. Then we are going to have, as a kind of a wild card, Jane Poole, who is fake Arya. Now, at the moment, everybody still thinks she's Arya. Theon said to her as they were escaping, no matter what, just keep telling people you're Arya. That's your best bet to stay safe, because people will look after you. So if she keeps on telling people that she's Arya, then people may go, well, she's a Stark who's still alive. Maybe we should try and fall in behind her. Now, I suspect that probably won't last all that long, because she's heading up to the wall, and Jon will come back from the dead, as it were, and say, that's not Arya, that's Jane. But for a time, she may be considered a viable candidate. We know Littlefinger's cunning plan, because he said it to Sansa, which is that she is going to be the Lady of Winterfell. The North is going to be hers, because as far as he's concerned, Bran and Rickon are dead. Robb's dead. She's next in line. If he gets her marriage to Tyrion annulled, and George R. R. Martin has already kind of hinted that that is possible, if he manages to get that annulled and then turns up with her, then it'll be, oh, here's me, and here, by the way, are all of the cavalry of the Vale of Arryn, the Knights of Arryn, who we saw them appear on the show, and that is kind of like the impressiveness of that happened there is kind of the feel that we would have, because all of Westeros has been embroiled in this civil war, but the Knights of Arryn, who are actually quite renowned, have been sitting it out. They've not been doing anything. They've been sitting in the Vale of Arryn, not doing anything. And so when they do come in, they're at full strength. Everybody else has been fighting battle after battle after battle. The Knights of Arryn are at full strength. So Sansa will have her supporters, notably Littlefinger and the Vale. And then Jon, we've already heard that Stannis has offered to legitimize Jon. And Robb Stark also, it would appear in his will, legitimized Jon and named him his heir. And there's half a dozen nobles in the north who witnessed that. And they will probably then fall in behind Jon. What we have here is what will appear to be a Stark succession crisis, because everybody thought all of the Starks were gone, and then suddenly, whoa, the Starks are back, and everybody has got different people championing them. Now, this is not going to, I mean, a lot will come out from this, I am absolutely sure. Perhaps this will lead to Littlefinger's downfall. But I think that the Starks will work it out between them. They will decide. I think Bran will recuse himself. I think Rickon will probably be dead. I think fake Arya will be outed as being fake. And so I think it's just between Jon and Sansa. And I think that they will probably come to some kind of tacit agreement. So that's where we're going with this. And I think all of that is probably going to be covered in the Winds of Winter. If I had to guess, my guess is still that the Winds of Winter will end, or A Dream of Spring will begin, depending on exactly which way around George R. Martin wishes to do it, with the others reaching or breaching the wall, and Dany and the dragons arriving in Dragonstone or the south of Westeros, by which time the north needs to have sorted itself out. Okay, so question from Dominic Vaughan. Do you think Roose always had betrayal in his mind, given the historical enmity between Stark and Bolton, or is he just an arch opportunist? Okay, so we actually have a George R. R. Martin quote on this, which is really useful. So he was asked about this. He was asked something along the lines of, at which point did Roose decide that he was going to switch sides? And this was back in the happy time when he was willing to answer questions like this. And he said this. He says, if you reread all his sections carefully, his being Roose Bolton, if you reread all of his sections carefully, I think you will see a picture of a man keeping all his options open as long as he could, sniffing the wind, covering his tracks, ready to jump either way. So that's how George R. R. Martin describes Roose Bolton, as someone who, all the way through to that chapter that I've already spoken about, when he goes wolf hunting, when he burns the ancient book, when he sends Stark loyalist troops off to attack somewhere that really doesn't make any sense and basically die, that's the point at which he decides to change sides. But until that point, he's keeping all his options open. Now, the video I did a little while ago, I kind of dug into this and showed how he's trying to be opportunistic even before then. First of all, being opportunistic within the context of, how do I make the most of this staying on Team Stark? Because first of all, he's there trying to take control of the army. That doesn't quite work. Then when Robb has basically become betrothed to the Freys. What does Roos do? He also marries one of the Freys. And why? Well, because suddenly one of the Frey daughters is going to be the new queen. And that would make Roos Bolton married to one of the queen's sisters, cousins. He would become part of the extended new royal family. And there's even a chance perhaps that if they were like cousins or something like that, that would be a perfect match. So his children could then perhaps marry the children of Robb Stark and whichever Frey he chose, and then perhaps he could see a situation where his grandchildren could be sitting on the throne in the north. So that's his first kind of play. Then we get this whole business with Lady Hornwood, which is easily overlooked. But Lord Hornwood dies. This is one of the people that Roose Bolton sort of puts in the middle of the firing line in a battle. And Ramsay Bolton basically kidnaps the newly widowed Lady Hornwood, forcibly marries her, and claims the Hornwood estate, which is, if you remember back to the map, that's just south of where the Boltons are, but the Dreadfort. So that sort of expands out their territory. And this clearly was something Ramsay didn't just do of his own volition. How on earth did he know about this opportunity? He had to have been told by Roos. And this, again, is opportunistic because it's a win-win for him. Worst case scenario, then Roos can go, that's just my, my bastard son's like. I'll tell him to stop, give him a slap on the wrist. Not my fault. I was down here doing your bidding all the way down here. That's one possible outcome, by which time they may well have a child who could be inheriting the Hornwood estate. Or perhaps after the war has won, then he will be in a position, Roose Bolton may be strong enough, Robb Stark may be weak enough, that Robb Stark doesn't have the authority to say that to Ramsay. So maybe they get to keep it. So all the way through this, he's just hedging his bets. He's taking little opportunities. And it's when he realizes that actually Robb's not going to win this, that's when he shifts. He is an opportunist who makes the most of what he can, what situation he's in order to further his family. At which point, actually, this is roughly halfway through a live stream, maybe even a little bit more. I have to say my quick thank yous. Patrons, thank you. Particularly thank you for coming up with these ideas of what we're going to be covering over the coming weeks. I'm very excited by this series. As I say, yes, I'd love to dig back into the Starks and the Lannisters and the Arryns and the big houses, but also some of the smaller houses. If there's a house you particularly want us to be covering, do let me know. If you're watching live in the live chat, I'll have a quick read through that while we're on air. If you're watching this back a little bit later, just drop down in the comments. If there's a house that, not a teeny tiny house where we don't know anything about them, but if there's like a medium-sized house that you're really intrigued by, let me know down there and we'll see whether we can cover that off, because I'd like to sort of get into a few of those mid-tier houses that are really intriguing. So House Reed, I'm definitely going to be doing House Reed. I'll definitely do House Dane, and that kind of house. So do let me know. But patrons, thank you for your support. I hugely appreciate it. If you would like to support this channel, the best way to do that, and obviously get a chance to influence things that I do like that, link down in the description, or if you're watching live, somewhere in the live chat. I'm sure one of the moderators will drop it in. Talking of which, moderators, thank you. You are amazing. If you're in the live chat, show them a bit of love. So let's get back to the questions. Let's have a quick look. The suggestions are already coming in. House Mormont suggests Commander Ray Longwaters. Sebastian Holden. House Blackwood suggests Kaziglu Bay. House Royce from Chaos Ballerina. These are all excellent suggestions. Andrew K suggesting House K, storied, ancient, distinguished, but shrouded in secrecy. I would need to read up a little bit on them. The Blackwoods, again, Roger. Oh, Callie Summers saying, how about a compilation of Essozi houses with ties to Westeros, Roger, Mopatis, Baelish, etc. Yeah, interesting. LD House Strong. Yeah, that's a good one. Sebastian Holden suggesting House Morn, Raven's Oath, House Manderley. The Tarleys, Illyrion Pains, yeah, that's a House Clegane. Yeah, there's a lot of really good houses here. What I think we'll do is we'll sort of roughly work our way from the north down to the south. So we'll start with some of the houses in the north, and then Riverlands, the Vale, and then work our way, and we end up down right down in the south with the Martells. House Hightower, yes, a lot of really good houses that we can definitely be looking at. Urias Tosh says Robert hates House Tallheart. Do I? Or are you talking about a different Robert? Right, let's go to some questions from Dominic Vaughan saying, is there any significance to the odd chipped grey ice eyes to the wider plot, or do we think George R. R. Martin's desire to make he and Ramsay seem quite vampiric or corpse-like? Yes, so chipped ice eyes, that's how Ramsay Bolton's eyes are described. Roose Bolton's blue, but yes, this kind of ice feel to them is definitely there. Is there any significance? I will get on to the bolt-on theory. I'll do that as like the finale to this because it's a really fun theory. But is it to do with the wider plot, or is it just to make them more sinister, vampiric, corpse-like? I think it's definitely to make them appear more. Yeah, I mean, it's a vampiric corpse-like is probably the wrong way of saying it, but as we have established, blue eyes is the others, is ice, is a threat. Then any character that is presented as having very blue eyes, we're immediately on the back foot with. We're immediately thinking, oh, hang on a moment, is this somebody that we need to be worried about? And similarly, the way that it's not just to do with the eyes, but the way particularly Roose Bolton is described is, he talks in a very low tone. Everyone has to kind of lean in to listen to what he's saying. The way he's described as being this kind of like gaunt figure, almost ageless. He looks like he hasn't aged. He's in his 40s, but he doesn't look like it. His lips are very thin and almost disappear sometimes. His face is sometimes described, or at least once described, as mask-like. All of this is setting up this feeling of within us. This is George R. R. Martin is wanting us to be unnerved. I am actually on another channel I have, The Well Told Tale. If you've never come across it, I read audiobooks, my favorite classic fantasy and science fiction stories, and the podcast is a little bit ahead of the YouTube channel at the moment. I'm trying to get them equalized, but on the podcast I've started reading Dracula, which is an amazing story, and you can see I wouldn't say there's echoes between Roose Bolton and the description of Vlad Dracula, Count Dracula, but the feel that Bram Stoker is trying to get when you get those early chapters. I don't know whether you've read the story, but you get the early chapters where you've got Jonathan Harker, who's over in Transylvania, and he meets the Count. And for 2 or 3 chapters, it's just this... it's just unnerving. Everything is just slightly off, and we linger over the descriptions of the Count, and everything about them is just slightly off, his eyes, the way he speaks. Obviously, yes, his teeth, but also his skin color. These are the kinds of things that Bram Stoker kind of focuses on these things which are just slightly not right. And that is the kind of the feel that George R. R. Martin is going for, I think, with Roose Bolton. This idea that it's just we don't feel comfortable in this person's presence. Cat clearly does not feel comfortable in his presence, and it looks like others don't either. It's noticeable. I've got a question about this coming up in a moment, but it's noticeable Aya instinctively doesn't trust him. So that's the kind of feel we've got going on. He has created this character who we're supposed to not trust from the very beginning. Martin S. saying, I assume you'll also do the top kingdom leading houses, Starks, Tullys, Tyrells, Baratheons, Martells, etc. Yes, I will. I mean, this may turn into quite an epic series, but yes, I will definitely do the top level ones, but also it's just I'm intrigued which houses underneath that, the sort of the next tier down houses, people are interested in. Let's go to a question about I've got a couple of questions here from Jay and Michelle Alemo, who asked similar questions. Jay says, "Hey Robert, I'm looking forward to this new series. Do you think Roose's trueborn heir Domeric died of sickness or poison, and if poison, by who?" And Michelle Rimo says, "My question is about Domeric. We know that he was everything you could want your heir to be, but he died. My personal headcanon is that Ramsay killed him in order to take over his life, knowing he would be the only other option as an heir for Roose. What do you think?" Okay, so Domeric. This is Roose Bolton's son by his first wife. And we get a description of him. This is what Roose says about him. "A quiet boy, but most accomplished. He served 4 years as Lady Dustin's page and 3 in the Vale as a squire to Lord Redfort. He played the high harp, read histories, and rode like the wind. Horses. The boy was mad for horses, Lady Dustin will tell you. Not even Lord Rickard's daughter could outrace him, and that one was half a horse herself. Redfort said he showed great promise in the lists. A great jouster must be a great horseman first." So, as an aside, there's a little bit in there when it says not even Lord Rickard's daughter could outrace him, and that one was half a horse herself. This is Lyanna Stark we're talking about here, who we're told is, clearly a very talented rider. Not perhaps as talented as Domeric, from what we hear, but the fact that not even she could outrace him implies that that's clearly an accomplishment. And I do wonder, just as we're going down the Lyanna thing, whether there's a hint here to the Night of the Laughing Tree, when having established that Lyanna was great riding a horse, then Roose says, "A great jouster must be a great horseman first." Sort of hinting that there is a possibility that Lyanna, therefore, could be good at jousting. But we're talking about Domeric here. So what we're told, that the story is that he gets born and grows up and serves as a page for Lady Dustin, then goes to Lord Redfort. Redfort's an old house in the Vale of Arryn, not one of the top tier ones, but a little notch down. And while he was there, apparently he just really enjoyed the company of Lord Redfort's sons, and thought it was a bit sad that he didn't have any brothers. So when he got back to the Dreadfort, he was just going, I don't have anyone to play with, basically. Don't have anyone to have that kind of brotherly bond with. And so he sought out his half-brother. He knew that his father had a bastard son, this guy called Ramsay Snow. and said he was going to go and find him. Roos said that's not a very good idea, but didn't seem to ban him from it. And Domeric goes off. He sort of introduces himself to Roos. We don't know much about exactly what happened there. He comes back, and then he dies of some bowel problems or something like that. The Maester said something sort of generic about it. Roos Bolton basically says, no, it wasn't. It was poison. Ramsay poisoned him. And he's convinced of this. Maybe Ramsay said something. Maybe he just knows what Ramsay is like. But Ramsay, in the absence of any other information, and given we know what Ramsay is like, then I think we can be fairly sure that yes, Ramsay did poison him. The Michelle Rimo's saying, my personal headcanon is that Ramsay killed him in order to take over his life, knowing he would be the only other option as an heir for Roos. I mean, this is entirely possible. So Roos at that stage had no other children, so he didn't have an heir. And yes, he had just, in the story we have, he married, but he's in his 40s at this time, and he's thinking to himself, even if he has children, then by the time they're 18, then he's probably going to be maybe in his 60s. So he doesn't think he's going to last that long. So he's almost accepting of the fact that Ramsay is going to be his heir. So did Ramsay poison them? Almost certainly. We don't know. We haven't got any evidence, but does seem quite likely. Then Charlotte Glenn in the chat saying, it's my first live stream. Lovely to see you. Welcome. Julianne saying, do they have any redeeming qualities? Well, I'll allow you to decide that for yourself on the basis of what we know here. But none spring to mind. Let's put it that way. John March saying maybe Domeric was the Knight of the Laughing Tree. Well, I don't want to go too far down the Knight of the Laughing Tree rabbit hole, but the Knight of the Laughing Tree, in the context, for those who don't know what we're talking about, this is in the tourney at Harrenhal, which is what immediately preceded Robert's Rebellion. A mystery knight appeared called the Knight of the Laughing Tree, who challenged and then fought 3 knights whose squires had been picking on Howland Reed. Now, the clear implication of that is that the Knight of the Laughing Tree has to be somebody who wishes to uphold the honor of the North, House Stark, and the Reeds. And that leaves, I think, really only 2 options, either the Starks or Howland Reed himself. I think it's pretty clear cut that it was Lyanna. I think whereas Domeric might have been we don't know exactly when he was killed, incidentally, but Domeric may have been a good rider, may have been a good jouster, but did he have any motivation to join the lists specifically to be defending the honor of House Reed? No, absolutely none whatsoever. So I think, I mean, you're probably, John, probably weren't doing that anything more than tongue in cheek, but my take is no. I think for me, it's pretty clear that this was the Knight of the Laughing Tree was Lyanna. John March saying I was kidding. Yeah, I suspected as much. Andrew K saying too chivalrous for a Bolton. Charis Ballerina saying Ruth seems so blasé about his son being a kinslayer. For a guy so afraid of the wrath of the gods for kinslaying, he keeps Ramsay alive. Why is this? Well, yeah. So him being afraid of the wrath of the gods for kinslaying. This is a thing actually in sort of a follow-on to what he was saying, the bit that I just quoted. He sort of like says, well, what do you do? Kinslaying is clearly terrible, but what do you do when one of your sons kills the other son? And it's almost a rhetorical question. He's there. I mean, what do I kill that son? That doesn't seem to be making things any better. So is he actually afraid of the wrath of the gods? Well, his involvement in the Red Wedding seems to imply that he certainly doesn't care about it if somebody else is doing it, because he was actively involved in bringing on the abuse of guest right, killing guests in your own home, which is what Walder Frey was doing. That gets the wrath of the gods. We're told this many times. Roose Bolton doesn't come across as being a particularly pious man. Let's put it that way. I think he just uses these things sometimes as a sort of a turn of phrase. It would be my general take. I don't think I don't think that he's got this great moral center in any way. That is like saying, oh well, I shouldn't be killing that person because maybe it's against what the gods want. Martin S. If Roose Bolton had lived in the second age of Middle-earth and was offered one of the 9 rings of men by Sauron, would he have accepted? I would guess so. He is ambitious and unscrupulous enough. Yes. I think he would be an ideal candidate, somebody who is willing to or desperate for power, and probably thinks that he can do this in a very clever, subtle way, but is actually being manipulated by somebody else. Because it's worth just pointing out that although I talk about Roose Bolton's master plan, and clearly he is sort of the mastermind behind the Red Wedding, and he did play the Game of Thrones quite well, he is being used by Tywin as well. And this is not just a one-way thing. Tywin has kind of thought through this strategy, and basically he sees what's going on around in the Seven Kingdoms. He's established himself and dealt with well, he's got Renly, has been dealt with. He's come to this deal which got Robb Stark dealt with. One of his other key thoughts is Stannis. Stannis is somebody that is. It's not that Tywin feared Stannis, but he certainly respected Stannis, and he certainly knew that Stannis was never going to back down. So he had to deal with Stannis somehow. And basically, the deal that he came to with Roose Bolton was, if you deal with Robb Stark and Stannis Baratheon, then we're supporting you. But we're not giving you any troops or anything yet. We'll just make sure nobody attacks you from behind, and we're going to make you Warden of the North. So Stannis is using Roose. He's clever enough to know this is happening, but Stannis is using Roose to try and get rid of his opponents in the War of the Five Kings. He is using Roose to try and get rid of Robb. That was a success. And now he's using Roose to try and get rid of Stannis. So we'll have to see how that is going. Right, let's go to a question from Jay. And again, this is Michelle Rimo. You have both asked very similar questions today. I will group these ones together again, saying, is there any chance that all the flaying has something to do with Bolton's historical enemies being skin changers or wargs? And Michelle Rimo saying, the legends are that the Boltons used to flay Starks that they captured and would wear their skin as cloaks. Do you think there is some magic behind their flaying? Maybe they would glamour themselves with the cloaks of dead Starks to appear as one. Well, yes, I think there is clearly a link here, right? We've already talked about this sort of wolf hunting, and then you get wolf pelts, and the link across here between the great rivals, the Boltons and the Starks, and then they flay them because the Starks are, a lot of them, wargs, or have the potential to be wargs, but they're not. It's probably worth saying that it's not like the Starks have a monopoly on this. It's not like the Starks can be that the Starks are skin changers and nobody else is. The First Men, the potential is there across the piece. We meet several wildlings who are skin changers, and there's even the Warg Kings. We don't know much about them, but there were some kings. We have the Red Kings, we have the Kings of Winter. The Warg Kings were another set of kings that there were in the north at one point, which the Starks defeated. So it's not as if the Starks were even the house most associated with this. But yes, you can certainly see this kind of link that perhaps the Boltons, in a kind of a mockery of, pardon me, kind of mockery of skin changing, might do that. Is there some magic, though? Well, some have suggested, just again by looking at the map, the map I have won't quite show this, but over the narrow sea, the nearest city over the narrow sea is Bravos, and there you get the skin changes, the faceless men, who although they use very different words for it, they do take the skin of the face off of somebody and then use this. This is what happens. I mean, we've seen it in the sort of the Hall of Faces on Game of Thrones, and it happens to Arya in the book. She gets the face of a girl put onto her, and that transforms her appearance. And so the question is this something that maybe the Boltons do? Is this a magical thing that they can do as well, but with the whole skins? If we talk about them turning the skins into like cloaks and things like that, or is this just like a cultural remembrance of that just kind of passed down through generations? It's worth saying that we don't see any evidence of this. The Boltons are presented as being many things, almost all of them bad, but they're not ever really portrayed as being magic users in any sense. We don't hear rumors of them having these dark seances or doing any kind of magical tricks to change their appearance in any way. We don't hear about that. So I think the answer is probably no. I think that George R. R. Martin will have been creating this deliberate feel of this kind of pelting wolves and the Boltons doing that. So I think that bit is intentional, but there's no evidence of any magic behind it. Charis Ballerina saying, looking up the Boltons, I saw many people say Roose believes in the curse of Harrenhal and that he thinks he's doomed as its lord. Where does this come from? I can't remember seeing him say that he believes in the curse of Harrenhal. Again, maybe in the chat if somebody wants to look that up. I'd be fascinated to see what he says. The Curse of Harrenhal, for those who don't know, Harrenhal was built by Harren the Black just a few days before Aegon the Conqueror landed, and he didn't last long. And then since then, the ownership of it has passed from person to person to person, and nobody who rules Harrenhal lasts long. Even in the story we have, you look at Tywin was there. He hasn't lasted long. How Strong we saw in House of the Dragon, Fire and Blood, they didn't last long. They were Lords of Harrenhal. They didn't last long. Even if you go to House Went, who had it during the tourney at Harrenhal, Lady Went still exists when we're coming to the Song of Ice and Fire, but she is not in control by the time we get to this bit of story we have. So this is House Loston have it for a while. A couple of other houses. It does feel like a curse. Is it actually cursed? I think that's another story perhaps we can get into when we get down to, maybe we will look at How Strong, and we can look at the curse then. But it's certainly people use the curse, which is a very strong George R. R. Martin theme, which is that the truth or not of a prophecy or a bit of magic is actually less important than whether people believe it. Janos Slint, agree with Wood pointing out, Janos Slint was given it. He didn't have it for very long. Littlefinger was given it. I think consensus is he probably, although he deliberately didn't go there, but probably he won't last all that long either. Let's go to Joel the Dreamer saying Barbara Bolton in Fire and Blood was an interesting character. Imagine if she had become queen. She seemed good. Yeah, we were talking about her. This is the character that came down south and sort of said that we should feed the poor people. We should feed the starving people. So yes, if we're looking for a redeeming character, if we're looking for a Bolton hero, I think she's probably the closest we're going to get. And I kind of like that for George R. R. Martin, actually. He could have picked anyone to have compassion in that situation, but to pick a house that we don't normally think of as being compassionate, probably, adds an extra layer of depth going on here. Not every Bolton is horrible. Andrew Kay saying, I wonder if the flaying emerged out of bitterness clashing with other kingdoms with skin-changing abilities in the ancient past while having no magic of their own. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, maybe the reason why we don't ever see the Boltons associated with magic is because they're not magical. And if there are several other families, kingdoms around where they are skin changers, then yes, perhaps this is their way of sort of getting revenge, showing they're not scared, something along those lines. Let's go to Martin S. Saying, hello Robert, I saw some YouTube video a year or two ago that ranked all the houses of Westeros in the Song of Ice and Fire era from good to evil. The house they set as the most evil was, you can probably guess given the context, House Bolton. Would you agree? It doesn't seem unreasonable to me, although there are other candidates. Yes, so there are other candidates. I mean, I'm not... As you know, I'm not really a massive fan of the sort of the ranking from good to bad. I assiduously try to avoid it while we're doing the Targaryen kings, despite many people asking how I would rank the kings. And so I don't, and instinctively, I don't want to rank the houses either from good to bad. And I think that George R. R. Martin wouldn't want us to. But for the sake of this, happy to play with this one a little bit. Yes, House Bolton are clearly one of the worst houses. I would throw up House Clegane as another possibility. House Ulla, I've already spoken about, but there is one other which we don't hear much about at all, but I think this is George R. R. Martin just having a bit of fun with us, because this is House Cod, which is a house in the Iron Islands, and their house words remember the house words are often, ours is the fury, or something which is kind of like trying to show off. We do not sow, which is, we'll just go and take whatever we want. Winter is coming. Kind of scary words, kind of strong words, showing the pride of that particular house. House Cod. Their house words are, though all men do despise us, which is wonderful. So Asher Yara even says this to Christopher Botley. So do you know what their house words are? It's they have such a bad reputation in the Iron Islands. Everybody just basically says that they're, if you go there, then they're not respecting guest rights. There's incest. There's all manner of terrible things, and they just don't care. This is their house words. Everyone hates us. We don't care. I would, if I were to pick one, I think George R. R. Martin is telling us that it's probably House Cod. Joel the Dreamer saying the others are desert Boltons. Yeah, absolutely. I covered that symmetry a little bit earlier. It's definitely there. Reflective Rambling saying my house words, meep. Let's go to Matthew Preston saying also the motto of Millwall FC. I'm very aware. Daniel Dibka saying, is their sigil a hand with only the middle finger raised? Yes. Let's go to a question from Commander Ray. This is a really interesting question. Arya is the catalyst for Harrenhal being taken by the North, yet she never reveals her identity. What do you think Roose would have done if she gave her true name when she met him? So this is a fascinating moment. So we focus in on Arya's bit of this story, and they kind of fudged this on the TV show, so we didn't sort of visually see it either. When I say they fudged it, it's because this was Tywin was the sort of the main man going on around here rather than Roose Bolton. But what happened with the handover or changeover from the Lannisters to the Northern forces is this was precipitated by Arya using up one of her three names. Now you'll remember the story. She picks two names for Jaqen to kill, and then she wants a third. And she starts off by saying, I name Jaqen Hagar, and Jaqen says, no, you can't name me. And then she says, well, in that case, I want you to be killing all of these people over here, because suddenly she's remembered she's a Northerner and that a whole load of Northerner prisoners have arrived, and she wants to help them escape. And so Jaqen goes, okay. And so they get like this, it's called weasel soup. They get this soup, bring that up, poisoned soup, basically, or, well, Jaqen and his friends kill them. Now that's the point at which suddenly the Northern forces can come in and take over. And they do, and Roose Bolton hears this rumor of weasel soup, and he gets Arya, and he basically talks to her, and she doesn't admit that she's Arya Stark. Now, this is a common question, is why not? And although it's not written out explicitly, basically she does not trust him. She instinctively does not trust him. She's sort of saying, oh, if there was a house that I knew that they were Stark loyalists, basically, then I would talk to them. But this guy, I don't really trust. So the question is, though, what if she had? What would Roose Bolton have done? Well, the important thing here is that Roose Bolton, at this stage, he'd not yet made the change. He was not just pretending to be still loyal to the North. He hadn't yet made that decision. If you remember back to what George R. R. Martin had been saying, this is somebody who's keeping all of his options open. So, what would he have done? Well, my best guess is probably he would have kept hold of her for a while, thinking, I don't know which way this is going to go, but I could send her either direction. I could send her up to Robb Stark. I could send her down to Tywin Lannister. And that's what George R. R. Martin says that he was like. He's somebody who's there keeping all of his options open for as long as he possibly could. So he could very happily keep her there. Like, he found out what was going on, and then he sent hold on for a few days, and then send a message up to River Run where he knows that Robb Stark isn't, sort of saying, hey, I've got her here. I suggest I keep hold of her here for the moment, because Robb Stark's off somewhere in the Westerlands. Don't want to send her over there. Catelyn's gone off somewhere, off on a mission. So let's keep her here rather than risk sending her across country during wartime. I think that's probably what he would do. It would make him look like he's staying loyal, but keep hold of her. Then when he changes his mind, that's the point at which he could then be sort of letting Tywin Lannister know that he's got Arya Stark. And what happens then? Well, I suspect, although this could get quite dark if you think about it, I suspect what happens is that we had fake Arya, so that the Starks, the Boltons, could marry a Stark. I think he would just use the real Arya. I think we would have had Arya force married to Ramsay, and that's quite dark when you think about what happened with Sansa, but then also on the TV show, but then also what would Arya do? One of them would die, I think, is probably the short answer. And I'll let you speculate on which one is more likely. Joel the Dreamer saying, do you think it's possible that Ullers gave Rhaenys Targaryen, I don't quite understand the word, but I do believe she was their captive. Yes. So, I mean, we don't know this. This is sort of going way back because we're sort of comparing the Ullers to the Boltons. This was when the Targaryens were trying to subdue Dorne. They would fly over it, and Rhaenys got shot down over the Hellholt. Her dragon died, and she disappeared. The rumor was perhaps she had been tortured under there. I think probably yes is the short answer, because what we have is, and this is a whole rabbit hole. I'm not going to go down all the way down this rabbit hole, but when you had that letter, Prince Nymor, change in leadership in Dawn, the new leader, Prince Nymor, sends the letter to Aegon the Conqueror, off the back of which he grips the Iron Throne tight, so blood starts dripping down. He flies over to Dragonstone, flies back, and then announces, that's it, we're going to be at peace with Dawn. All very mysterious. The bit that we often overlook, although it would have been very obvious at the time, was that they brought her dragon's skull back with her to King's Landing as a peace offering. If her body was there, then perhaps they would have brought her body back as well. But he went to flew to Dragonstone, which implies that there was something that went there as well. I think that was her body. I think there was evidence that she was tortured, and they thought, we don't want this happening out in court so everyone can see. We want this done in secret so you can see it. We're returning the body. You can do with this as you will. Give her the the funereal rites that we know the Targaryens do. I think that's probably what happened. Let's go to a question from Joel the Dreamer saying, if only Lord Rickard learnt about the miller's wife. So the miller's wife was who the mother of Ramsay Snow, basically claiming the right of the first night. Roose Bolton killed the miller, took advantage of the miller's wife, and Ramsay Snow was born from that. And he, in fact, I don't think he killed the miller. I think he cut the miller's tongue out so that he couldn't speak of it, and couldn't tell Rickard Stark, the Lord of Winterfell, about it. What would Rickard Stark have done? Well, probably punish him in some way. Let's go to question from Luna Cascade. Why were the Boltons and Starks arch enemies? Who was the king of the north that finally subdued the Boltons, and at what cost? Lastly, had Eddard and Roose had any interactions? Under what circumstances? So I think we've covered why the Boltons and Starks were arch enemies. We don't know the name of the king of the north that finally subdued the Boltons, but we do know the lord of the Boltons at the time, who was a guy called Rogar the Huntsman. But as for Eddard and Roose, did they have any interactions? Well, they did. They were both at. So Roose was part of the army, Ned's army that went south. I dare say we're not told anything about this, but I dare say Roose Bolton probably was pushing for control of that in some way as well, as was his way. I think it's probably fair to say that the little bit of information we got about Roose Bolton after the Battle of the Trident, I said this right at the front of the live streams, but in case you missed it, after the battle, then they were trying to work out what to do with Barristan Selmy, who was on the opposite side but had survived and was a bit of a living legend. And Roose Bolton was arguing that he should be killed. And Robert Baratheon decided not to. Now, what that clearly implies is that if he was there having a conversation with Robert Baratheon, he was very probably the northern representation in Robert's sort of Council of War, because what happened immediately after that battle was that Ned Stark was sent south to King's Landing to race to get there ahead of Tywin Lannister, because Tywin Lannister has suddenly roused himself, having not been involved in this war at all. He'd raised an army and was marching to King's Landing. No one knew whose side he was on. That the risk was that he was going to declare for the Mad King, for Aerys II. He was going to go to King's Landing and then he would garrison it, and then it would be really, really hard to dislodge them from King's Landing. So, the Red Keep. So Ned was sent straight away down south with an army to try and cut off the Lannisters before they got. He didn't quite make it in time, but he left straight away. And the implication has to be that Roose Bolton was kind of left behind as the northerner representative with the army that stayed there, with the bit of the army that was there with Robert Baratheon, which means that Ned probably only found out about this later on. We saw how he responded to the needless murder of Rhaegar's children, and I think that he probably would have responded in an equally disgusted manner to Roose Bolton wanting to be randomly killing off other people. So, given You see the interaction between Ned and Sir Barristan actually a bit later. It's actually quite respectful between the two of them. Other interactions, we don't really read of them. They had them. So Cat Stark has views of him. It's not the first time she's seen him. Jon Snow has been to the Dreadfort, which seems to imply he wouldn't have gone there sort of on his own. Seems to imply he must have gone there with Ned and a sort of a group for a little sort of tour around the north, which Ned did seem to do on a relatively regular basis. So I think that they had interactions once Ned was the Lord, just not many. Let's go to a question from Catherine Furseth saying, "Hi, Robert. What did any Bolton ever know or honour? Is how the proprietor of the Lazy Eel describes them in A Dance with Dragons. Jaime says to Brienne that lords such as the Boltons are only kept in their place by a stronger lord and would otherwise rebel. House Bolton thus fills the role of the arch-villain in the north, much as House Frey does in the Riverlands. But what do you think George R.R. Martin wants us to take away story-wise from this house? Is it closer to Jaime's comment that in Westeros power comes only from a house's strength, or the truth of Varys' word that power resides where men believe it resides?" Thanks. Interesting question. My take is George R. R. Martin, he's not trying to feed us meanings. He's not trying to get us to come to specific sort of conclusions, interpretations of his work. He's very much along the kind of the Tolkien line of cordially disliking allegory in all its forms. He much prefers applicability. That was what the term Tolkien used, and George R. R. Martin has said the same thing in different ways with slightly different language, which is that if you're looking for an allegory in his story, then it's not intentional on his part. He's very happy, however, for people to read into the story and then take their own interpretations out from it. So the classic example of this is he has been asked several times about, are the others and the long night coming, everybody is squabbling down south of the wall, but the real threat is there and the danger, and it's going to hit everybody and it's going to destroy everything, but nobody's paying attention to it because they're all squabbling and fighting among themselves. Is this a climate change analogy? That's put to him quite regularly, and his answer is no, it's not. He's very happy for people to take that. He says that he always follows on, and he says he's very happy for people to take that as a lesson from his stories, but he did not write it with that intention. And I think that's the interpretation, or the method of interpretation that we should apply to this kind of thing. I don't think he is wanting us to I don't think he is trying to use this to teach us a specific thing. I do think that he does use it to show us people's characters. Now, the classic example here, obviously what Jaime is referring to, is how does his father Tywin, or how did Tywin respond to the problem houses in the Westerlands, being House Rain and House Tarbeck. We know the Rains of Castamere. He just came down hard on them. He destroyed them completely and utterly, made sure everybody knew it, and then whenever anybody was threatening to do anything similar ever again, he just went out and reminded them what he did last time. That is one way to be governing. And so that's where we're told this. Is this the way that others have governed? Clearly, no. Clearly, the comparison here is the Starks did not ever. The Boltons rebelled against them 2-3 times, perhaps even more times, and they never completely squashed them and got rid of the house. That is weakness, perhaps you might argue, and it's come back on them here with the Red Wedding. But the way that George R. R. Martin, he's trying to show us these different approaches, and he's specifically trying to use that to teach us about Jamie. And Jamie goes on a journey where he starts out very much with this idea of what House Lannister does is that's the only way to do things. By the time we get later on in the books, he's starting to distance himself, really. He's starting to see that maybe the Lannisters, it's not the only way to go. We see this, actually, I was reading, as if you're regular watchers of the live stream, you'll know that I'm on a very slow re-listen through A Song of Ice and Fire. It's deliberately slow on my part. I like to listen to a chapter at a time in its entirety, but then not charge on to the next one, actually spend a bit of time thinking about the chapter, because George R. R. Martin does write in chapters, if you not just in a convenient way to break up the story, but each chapter has its own story to tell. It has some kind of obstacle, some kind of challenge, and then it works its way through to a resolution at the end. 90% of his chapters work along this kind of principle. And the obstacle or issue might be an actual thing, or it could just be more of a bit of an emotional growth. And I was listening again to quite recently to I'm in A Storm of Swords, about 2/3 of the way through. Jamie has just arrived back in King's Landing, and he's basically thinking, that's it, I'm back, I'm here, back with my family. It's all okay again now, everything's going to be fine. And the chapter is just this series of disabusing him of these notions. The first thing he comes across the Kingsguard, and he finds that the Kingsguard has changed since, just in the time that he's been gone. New members of the Kingsguard have been appointed. They're not doing the things that he would want them to do. He goes to Cersei, and he's wanting certain things from her. He's saying, hey, let's forget all of this. Let's just get married, the two of us. The Targaryens got away with it. And she's like, no, don't be stupid, not doing that. Then he goes to his father, and his father's like, okay, you're back. Now here's all the plans I have for you. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. And then Jamie's saying, no, I don't want to do any of that. I want to stay in the Kingsguard. And he sees his father for what his father is. It's just not caring about him on a personal level. He just wants to use him to be furthering the family. And it's the start of what is this arc for Jamie that goes on for the next 1.5 books, where he's starting to distance himself emotionally, as well as physically, from his family, from the Lannisters. And so when we've got him talking to Brienne about, this is what happens, the Boltons have to be kept in their place by a stronger lord. The Freys do, this is what my father did. When early on, he believes this. Yeah, he believes this because he thinks that what his father did was necessary. Later on, he's starting to question everything about his upbringing, his father, whether that was the right way of things. So that's the big shift. And to sort of return to the original point that I was trying to make in response to your sort of question, is that this isn't about George R. R. Martin trying to make us feel a particular thing. He is trying to show us a character and show us how a character reacts to that. Okay, let's go to the chat. I think I've got a couple of questions in the chat. Kieran McGee saying, do you think Ramsay had an end game, or is he just a wild card? My show/book knowledge is a bit blurred. Would you rather have an overnight stay in Joffrey or Ramsay's castle? Great content as usual. Well, would you rather have an overnight stay in Joffrey or Ramsay's castle? I will throw to the chat because I'd be fascinated to see what the chat says. I think Joffrey's in every single time. If you stayed with Ramsay, then there's a chance you wouldn't come out alive. With Joffrey, you can just try to avoid him. But in terms of does he have an end game or is he just a wild card? Well, he's a sort of a wild card, but he does seem to have certainly Roose seems to think that he has an end game. Roose thinks that so he's married to Frey, Rosalind Frey, I think it is, and he says, if she pops out babies at the same rate that she pops in tarts, then I'm going to have a whole load of new Boltons running around, or something along those lines. He's basically saying she eats too much, but also he's saying, okay, so yeah, I should be having lots of babies now. But then he says, but Ramsay will kill them all, and perhaps that's for the best, because I'm not going to be living forever anyway. So the clear implication is that Roose thinks that Ramsay's plan is he killed Domeric, the heir. Now he's got himself to be Ramsay Bolton, not Ramsay Snow. He's been legitimized, and then he's going to kill off any other potential rivals so that he is the heir to the Boltons, which gets him both Winterfell and the Dreadfort, and he then can just carry on and be Lord of the North or King of the North or whatever he wants to be. So that's what the plan basically is. Ramsay, however, seems quite cunning rather than having this master plan. He's a bit like Roose in that Roose is sort of like swaying with events and making the best of whatever comes along. That seems to be Ramsay's approach too. It's not that he's got this great master plan where he knows exactly where he's going and all of the steps in order to get there. He's just, a new baby has come along who might threaten him in a few years' time. He'll kill him. That's the sort of the extent of it. Carl Karsnark's got the full quote from Tolkien. I cordially dislike allegory in all its manifestations and always have done so since I grew old and wary enough to detect its presence. Yes, absolutely. Which you will see that this is why one of the many reasons why the Lord of the Rings is so successful, because it's not just making a point. We can read it and we can take things from it anew every single time. Martin S. saying, in story, who invented the nickname Ned for Eddard Stark? I don't think it's... I don't think we're told that a person came up with it as a nickname. I think that this is a general a shortening of Eddard. Like, for example, we have... Ned Dane is technically Eddard Dane. It's just you short Eddard to Ned. And there's a lot. So certainly in England, I'm sure this is true in other cultures as well, but in sort of with English names, often there's a traditional way of shortening it or making it a nickname that people use. Like, for example, Henry becomes Harry. That's just, or possibly Hal. So a couple of English monarchy examples. Henry V was known as King Hal, and Harry, Prince Harry, as of now, is actually technically Henry. So the Harry Henry thing, this is the same with Ned and Eddard. Andrew K saying, speaking of the miller's wife, to show who we are dealing with. Yeah, we were talking about this just a moment or two ago. Roos had not one shred of remorse about any of it, but mentions annoyance at a horse injury and unsuccessful hunt that day. Yeah, I think that says a lot about him. AAK, thank you very much for the super sticker. I appreciate that. Luna Cascade, Robert, do you have a favourite quote of Roos or Ramsay Bolton? What is it? I'm not sure I do have a favourite quote from either of them. No. I'll have a think about that. If one comes to mind, I will tell you. People coming back on the where do you want to stay? Joffrey's or Ramsay's. Reflective Rambling saying, I'm taking my chances in King's Landing. Michael talks also saying, Michael talks about stuff saying King's Landing versus the Dreadfort overnight. Sign me up for King's Landing. Yeah, I think this is a Daniel Dipka saying Joffrey's castle has a tunnel to a brothel. Yeah, you have to find it first. So yes, I think there's a general feeling that probably King's Landing is better. Right, let's go to Ty Farnsworth saying, what do you believe was Roose Bolton's end goal with betraying the Starks and taking control of the North? Were there greater ambitions to put his descendants on the Iron Throne, or was he satisfied staying premier in the North? As always, thanks for everything you do. Well, thank you very much. End goal, well, in fitting with this feel we have of him as being an opportunist who was just trying to improve his and his house's situation based on what is put in front of him, then I don't think he has a specific end goal. He will just always be trying to improve things. So first of all, I think that his thinking was, okay, so we can try and make our best use of being a part of this army. Perhaps I can gain a bit of influence by being the person who leads the army down to the south, and that will make it very clear that I'm the next in command. House Bolton is the next most important after House Stark. Then I think he sort of changed his thinking to go, okay, so if I marry the Freys, and because the Starks are marrying the Freys, then I can be marrying into the royal family. I can gain a little bit of influence going on there, and perhaps even get a part of the royal family. So my grandchildren might be, on the throne, because by this point Robb is king of the North and the Riverlands. Then I think that his thinking was, okay, so Robb's fallen, Winterfell's fallen, lots of the North has fallen. I could now actually take over the North. And that was his next play. And where after that? Well, at the moment it's to take over the North on behalf of the Lannisters and be the warden of the North. Might he have seen an opportunity after that to become king of the North? Maybe he would, if he found the opportunity, he would do that. Maybe if he saw the opportunity to take another step and be king of the Seven Kingdoms. I don't think his mindset was, right, how do I get to be king of the Seven Kingdoms? I think his mindset was, at each stage, how do I make best use of this situation? How do I advance myself? How do I advance House Bolton? So that seems to be the mindset he's carried all the way through this. I don't think it was a specific end goal. He's just going to keep on going until he dies, and he's quite relaxed about that possibility. Let's go to Red Zebedee with a super sticker. Thank you very much. That's your first super on a live stream, so I hugely appreciate that. Thank you very much. Then let's go to Brandy 1842. Saying, hi Robert, what's your opinion about the theory that suggests the Boltons used to skin Starks and wear their skins to gain skin changer magic. This also ties into the bolt-on theory, which is tinfoil, I suppose, but still pretty cool. Okay, I did kind of tease this a little bit earlier. The bolt-on theory is a bit of fun because it's a tinfoil theory that just kind of connects, and it's almost certainly wrong, but it's fun. And it adds an extra element to these things. So the bolt-on theory, as well as having a good name, is based on the first principle that Roose Bolton is immortal. Now, we're told repeatedly, he doesn't look like he ages. So Reek, who's sort of a part of the Bolton staff, is just like, no, he's not really aged in the last 20 years or so. We're told that he does a whole load of weird things, like he's leeching himself to drain the bad blood from himself. And he's got the blue eyes. The theory then perhaps is that he is. One part of this theory says that, as we mentioned a while ago, maybe a Bolton was, as Old Nan suggested, maybe a Bolton was the Night's King. And maybe, therefore, the daughter that the child, the son that the Night's King and the Night's Queen had, then became a Bolton and grew up to be Roose Bolton. Hence, this is an immortal person. Hence the blue eyes, hence the not aging, hence that everything about them is quite unnerving, and also hence the Starks, although they may or may not have known it, they might have suspected it, being these great enemies of the Boltons, because the Starks, clearly their role is there being against the others. They're the sponsors of the Wall and the Night's Watch. They're the people who are there with the Winterfell crypts and all of these other things. And if the Boltons, therefore, are in some way related to, descended from the Night's King, that explains an awful lot of that. But obviously you would, if you are if you're Roose Bolton, you can't just live an immortal life. You have to do something to make sure people don't suspect you. So every now and then you need to change to a new person. How do you do that? By taking on some new body. In the same way that the Faceless Men, so this magic does exist in world, the Faceless Men, if we use the Bolton word, flay the face off of somebody, and then you can put that on and assume their identity. You can look like them. Maybe the Boltons do the same kind of thing. Maybe this is why they flay people, so that the Roose Bolton can then take the next identity on, look like a younger person, a younger version. He can take and look like his heir. This explains why he's so relaxed about Ramsay killing off all of his heirs, why he's there saying, oh, I'm not going to live, I won't live more than 20 more years. That's he seems incredibly relaxed about his own mortality because he's immortal. Of course he would be. So the theory therefore goes that what he's thinking he'll do at some point is he's just going to become Ramsay and then inherit, and then another generation will survive. So that's the bolt-on theory. As I say, is it true? Almost certainly not. Is there any evidence to support this? Almost certainly not. But does it tie together a whole load of things in a rather fun and interesting way? Yes, definitely. So that's the bolt-on theory, which has been, at least 10 years, if not more. That theory, or versions of that theory, have been going around. Question that was actually I've got one more question from my patrons, which is not Roose Bolton related. So now is a good time to get any more Roose Bolton questions into the chat. Martin S saying, you say the Boltons are not magic users. In George R. R. Martin's world, is magic something anyone is capable of studying it and absorbing the knowledge that can use, or is it its own innate talent like the Force in Star Wars? They're not magic users. We have not seen them use magic. Is an important distinction. I think it's fair to say. That doesn't mean that they don't. It means that we've not seen them do it. The nature of magic, I've been threatening for about 5 years to do a massive video series about the nature of magic in George R. R. Martin's world. The answer is it varies. So it seems that some bits of magic, like skin changing, being a green seer, this is a gift that you have to have, but then you can open up your third eye in certain conditions. So Bran was given the weirwood paste, which allowed him access to the weirwood network and seeing through the weirwood trees and things like that. Other bits of magic, like, for example, using glass candles, doesn't seem to necessarily require you to be magical, but you just need to know how to use them. Other things require huge amounts of training. Melisandre has said very clearly that she took years beyond count learning how to see visions in the flames and interpret them. However, Stannis also appears to have seen some things in the flames, so it's not, people can be involved in this. And then there are various people who said they went off and learned bits of magic, so you can definitely learn bits of magic. And there are some, you can get some bits of magic if you take magic potions, for example. Dany took the Shade of the Evening, and that allowed her to see lots of visions which were true in the most part. So it's a very mixed bag. Now, the short answer is that the normal people of Westeros don't have the natural ability to do something, nor do they have the ability and scope to learn how to do things. So magic is kept apart from them. But as well as there being so the amount of people who can do magic is incredibly limited. The other element to this is George R. R. Martin has said repeatedly, most recently and clearly, I think, when he did that interview with History of Westeros, what must now be 18 months ago, he said that it's very important for him to keep magic mysterious. He thinks that if you know how magic works, here's the formula. Eye of Toads and whatever. This is, if you had this list, you do A, B, and C, that creates D, which will be magic. The moment you do that, you take away the mystery of magic. You take away the bit of magic that makes you go, I don't quite understand that, so I fear it. And he wants the fear, the mystery to remain with magic. So he doesn't tell us all of the details. Question from Charis Ballerina, saying, the leeches. Roose clearly has some of the same impulses as Ramsay, but tries to keep in control of it, as he tells Ramsay to. He says leeching would help diminish these feelings. It's bad blood. Yes. And second part of that, pale eyes are a sign of anemia. Roose leeches to purposely make himself more anemic, to tire and calm him and prevent him from going feral at the wrong time. He's leeching his feelings, thoughts. Oh, this is quite interesting. So yeah, he definitely talks about the bad blood, and he has himself leeched regularly. He's the Leech Lord. That's how people. He's known for it. He's not doing this in secret. In fact, he's having, one time when Arya's there, he's having this meeting basically of his generals, and he's there pretty much naked but covered in leeches, until he sort of says, now take the leeches off, please. He doesn't say please. That's his. Roose Bolton's not the kind of person to say please. But he says this is good for getting rid of bad blood. Now, is this in order to stop his worse urges? Does he wish to stop his worse urges? I mean, I think it's an interesting theory. It's another one of those things that kind of is supposed to unnerve you. I think from George R. R. Martin, there's definitely an element of that, is that he's supposed to, we're supposed to look and go, that's not, because leeches, not nice. So it's supposed to unnerve us. Is he doing it deliberately in order to sort of control his darker impulses? I think the fact that he's doing this in plain sight, so everyone knows, seems to imply that this isn't some secret that he's trying to hide. So I don't think that there's an extra layer here that he's sort of, holding back the werewolf blood or something along those lines. I don't think that that's what it is. But yes, as you say, this is this would tire and calm him. If he loses blood, this would indeed tire him out and calm him, and I think that he will be aware of that. I think perhaps he thinks this helps him make calmer, cooler decisions. So yes, perhaps he does feel he has some things that he needs to control. Lolotov saying, any Bolton women confirmed in She-Wolves? This is, I'm assuming, a reference to potentially the next Duncan Egg story, which has the working title of the She-Wolves of Winterfell. It won't end up being called the She-Wolves of Winterfell, incidentally, but it'll probably be quite hard for us to stop calling it that, because we've been calling it that now for many years. The history there, for those who are wondering, George R. R. Martin did start writing the She-Wolves of Winterfell. He's written those three. He started writing the She-Wolves of Winterfell, and then he got stuck partway into it, stopped writing it. He's also written a firm outline for The Village Hero, which we think is Egg intervening in a conflict in the Riverlands, probably with the Brackens and the Blackwoods. And he's already thought of the plot of the outline plot of at least one more set in Dawn. So will the She-Wolves of Winterfell include the Boltons? Nothing confirmed is the answer to your direct question. Nothing has been confirmed. The timing is very much along the lines of what was a genuine succession crisis for the Starks, where the 4 or 5 Stark men died in quick succession, and their widows and their mothers and their daughters were then engaging what we might call in the Game of Thrones in Winterfell, jostling for power and position and who should be taking over. And that's the situation that Duncan Egg go into. Might there be a Bolton? Yeah, there might be a Bolton, but we've not been told that there is one. Red Zabadi saying, if there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, how long could the Boltons realistically hang on to it, given the magical connection of the Starks? There must always be a Stark in Winterfell. It's something I covered, some videos I did ages ago that I probably might be next on my redoing list. if not next, then I will do them at some point, is the ones that I did about House Stark and the North. Because I do want to look at this again. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell has several layers to this. The first layer is pure political pragmatism. This is useful for the Starks to have this. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell, because that means that the Starks have to carry on. They have to be ruling forever, because there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. The question is there some sort of magical reason for this? The more I think about it now, in the light of House of the Dragon, this has echoes of the prophecy that gets passed down from Targaryen ruler to Targaryen ruler, the one that Aegon the Conqueror seems to have got, that Viserys gets. There must be a Targaryen on the throne of the Seven Kingdoms. Feels like it echoes there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. So it does make me wonder whether that is where it came from. Clearly, by the point we reach in the story now, if there was any original meaning, that has gone. If this is some kind of prophecy, that does not necessarily mean that there is a magical element to it. There might be, but that doesn't mean that there's a magical element to it. What is intriguing is that the Starks were still there when Winterfell got burned down. When the Starks lost control of Winterfell, Bran and Rickon were still at Winterfell through that period. So it's not like they left and then suddenly everything went wrong. Everything went wrong while the Starks were still at Winterfell. So I don't think, if there is magic connection here, it's not that everything is going to go terrible if the Starks leave Winterfell. I don't think it's that clear. But as I said, it's a subject I do want to go back into with the benefit of another 4 or 5 years of sort of mulling on those kinds of things. Is that me caught up in the chat? Nearly. Just a couple of things here. David Dinmo saying, "Good day, Sir Robert. Good day to you. A bit off topic, but concerning whites. So there are fire whites, ice whites, science whites. Could the faceless men be a type of white?" So this is, it's an interesting question. I think my answer is no, on theological grounds, if that makes sense. I recently redid my look at the Faceless Men, and it reminded me once more that the Faceless Men is not just a bunch of cool assassins. This is a religious order, and all men must die. Vala Morgulis is not just a cool catchphrase. This is a statement of faith. This is what they are. The whole thing is about. They worship the god of death, and they offer basically a euthanasia service. They offer an assassination service. They are there to usher people into death. That's what their whole role is. They think that their god is present in all of the different gods across the piece. That's what they are about. And so they would see something that prevents death or brings people back from death, I think, as heretical. That's my take on it. The faceless thing, the putting the face on, is not bringing someone back. That is not that person has died. Aya, when she puts the face on, does not become that person. She gets an echo, like the voices, flashes, images of that person's life. This is the thing that lingers. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but that's the thing. But the person themselves have died. So she is taking on the body of a person, but that person has actually died. So that is not like a white, in as much as the way that George R. R. Martin describes, well, he describes ice whites and fire whites. They are dead people who have been reanimated by the power of ice or fire. And ice, those are the whites that we see in the Army of the Dead. And then fire, we have Beric Dondarrion, we have Lady Stoneheart, and potentially a bit of John in the future, because Beric Dondarrion is there as the foreshadowing for John, we're told. So the science whites, this isn't something, as far as I'm aware, not something George R. R. Martin has ever said. This is something, I mean, it's a phrase I've used for a long time to talk about what Qyburn does and has created in Robert Strong. The Undead Mountain is that he has figured out the science behind this, and he has done this. So I think, although it's an interesting possibility, I think that they are different. Andrew K saying, I hope Village Hero could feature either the Blackwood versus Bracken rivalry or possibly an issue besieging Pennytree. Yeah, I'm going for Blackwood versus Bracken. Luna Cascade asking, does the Dreadfort have a crypt like Winterfell? Yes, we're told about this. Roose Bolton had that one son, Demeric, and we're told that he was then interred beneath the Dreadfort along with the other children that he'd lost, that they hadn't ever sort of grown to adults or anything like that. That I think they were stillborn. But it's very clear that the Boltons are indeed buried underneath the Dreadfort. Let's go to a question from Karen Bennett saying, off topic, given that Viserys III was only 8 when he and Dany were taken away from Dragonstone, was he supposed to have taught her High Valyrian? Seems unlikely. Was he supposed to? Well, we're not sort of told exactly. Dany does learn High Valyrian. And I think it would kind of make sense that he teach her, because I mean she was 0 basically at that point. She'd just been born when they go over to Braavos. So by the time they spent the first 6 years there in Braavos, and then it's the two of them traveling around the free cities. So could he have taught her High Valyrian? Well, he could have done, but I think the much more likely is that while they were there under the protection of the Sea Lord, then there would be tutors and people like that for Dany, and she could have learned High Valyrian there. Traveling around the free cities. The free city, High Valyrian is not just a dead language. It was the language that the Valyrians used, but the free cities used to be a part of the Valyrian freehold. So everybody there does, not everybody there, but you know, the powerful tend to speak sort of dialects of it. So she could easily pick up, if she just by living, she would have picked up High Valyrian. Now, her High Valyrian probably is not pure High Valyrian. We're not really told this because we don't ever see her speaking High Valyrian from the perspective of somebody who also speaks High Valyrian perfectly. So we don't know this, but my instinct is that probably she got a grounding in it when she was very young, and then picked up the rest simply by sort of osmosis of living in the free cities, all the different sort of variations on it. So her High Valyrian is probably not very pure classical, if that makes sense, but I think it makes entire sense that she learns it. Martin S. So that was my last question from my patrons. So now is a good time. Drop any other questions into the chat. Martin S. saying, do you think all men must die is another nod to J.R.R. Tolkien's world and the fate of men there. I don't think so on this occasion. No, I mean, George R. R. Martin takes a lot from Tolkien, but I think not on this occasion. I don't think that's what's going on. Agreed. Weirwood saying merchants would need a common tongue. Yeah, absolutely. Many in one saying every free city has a Valyrian dialect. The bastard Valyrian, yes, and they can all understand each other. Varus Aurelius saying, I saw a rumor that Emilia Clarke did her entire final speech in the last episode of the show, which is when she's doing the speech to her army in one take. I can believe that. Andrew K saying a massive video series on the nature of magic. Yes, please. Yeah, I've been promising it for a long time, so I'm not going to promise it again because then I don't like letting people down. But it's on the list. Let's put it that way. Flicking through, Shelley J saying the only thing worse than the Dreadfort is the crypt of the Dreadfort. Yes. Agreed. Weirwood saying Barrows in Barrowtown. Yes, so Barrowtown, this is, for those who don't know, this is where the Dustins, House Dustin, are. And this shows that the Starks are not alone in sort of living above their dead. This is quite a northern thing. Quite a few places do. In Barrowtown, their castle, their great hall, is on top of, it's called the Long Barrow, which is it's an ancient burial site, basically sort of a man-made hill mound in which is someone is buried, and the rumors are this was the first, the High King of the First Men, or the last of the giants, or there's lots of different rumors, but clearly this was an important person. And the Barrow Downs is just a whole load of these barrows, but they have they built upon the Long Barrow, the biggest and most impressive one. Let's go to having a flick through. Caius Ballerina, do you think Lady Dustin is really pro Bolton? Oh, Lady Dustin's a complicated character. I will get into that in this video series I'm coming to. House Bolton is House Dustin and House Ryswell are pro Bolton. I think that's one thing I would say. They are by marriage. So I think that she is anti-Ned Stark. She's complicated. She's anti-Ned Stark. Her house is pro-Bolton. I think that she is of more variable loyalty. I haven't quite finished my thinking on this yet. But if you want to sort of prepare yourself for a future video, look for the snowmen on the walls of Winterfell and who the snowmen are. As people have been making snowmen of characters who are inside Winterfell in a way that people outside Winterfell can make out those characters. I think there's quite a big clue there as to what's going on. So do have a look at that. John March just saying, this is your first super chat. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the wonderful videos and streams. Thank you. I hugely appreciate it. Varus Aurelius saying, there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. Never says that the Stark has to be alive. Good point. Yes, the Starks. And another thing, I'm not going to go down this route because I could talk about the Crypts of Winterfell for a long time. But just if you want to go down thinking about the Crypts of Winterfell, I defy you to find, there might be one somewhere, but I defy you to find a description of somebody going down to the Crypts of Winterfell or dreaming about the Crypts of Winterfell or remembering the Crypts of Winterfell without the statues being anthropomorphized. By which I mean every time you go down there, it's noticeable in that first chapter when Ned goes down there with Robert Baratheon. It's, if you count, it's like 8 or 9 times in about 2 pages where the statues, we're told there's like they're human. They're watching. We're not told that they are you know, their eyes were like a stony flint, and it's almost as if their eyes were following around. So the statues were watching. Ned thinks about what their statues are thinking about. The wolves look as if as if they're moving. It's that every step there that John dreams about it. He thinks that they're judging him. Theon is down there, and again, it's like they're real. It's like they're saying, "You do not belong here." That every time they're mentioned, they are encapsulating humans, real humans. I've done a video on that. I'm not going to talk any more about that. I could. It's starting to get late. I should stop talking. Andrew Kay saying, I think Lady Dustin's northern sense of justice will kick in. The Bolton's ascent and the manner of it can't see sitting right with her. Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably right there. Okay, agree. Weirwood saying they stare at you, their eyes follow you, they judge. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's just talk very briefly about what's coming up on the channel. Trying to keep up doing at least 2 videos a week, hopefully 3 sometimes. You'll have seen I've done a few random Witcher videos as well recently, but I'm trying to keep up 1 a week on both Lord of the Rings and A Song of Ice and Fire. Tomorrow, a video that people have asked me for a long time, and I finally got around to doing it, which is Cersei a secret Targaryen? I have talked so many times on this channel about is Tyrion a Targaryen? And I've said, it's could be either way. It's very close. But always people come back and say, yeah, but what about Cersei? So I've done a video on whether Cersei is a Targaryen, which is coming out tomorrow. And what else have I got coming up on that? More in the Northern series, so expect Robb Stark's will to be explained at some point in the next few weeks, and more short form content on this channel on ITG Live. I produced quite a lot of short form content which seemed to go down quite well, so I've decided to be producing a bit more. Also, if you're interested, I'm now on TikTok with it, so if you are on TikTok, feel free to go and follow me there as well. Right, that is all for this time, but if you would like to watch some more of these live streams, there's a link appearing somewhere around here. If you would like to support this channel, get a chance to influence the things that we talk about on this channel, there is a link appearing around here to my Patreon page. That is all. Take care, everyone. I will see you again next week.